Chapter 2185. Arbor blinked and looked up at her husband. Is that so? She turned her head and glanced at Feng Lan, whose face had turned green and white. She suddenly felt that the crown prince seemed to have guessed correctly. Looking at Feng Lan's extremely pale complexion, she probably knew that her husband had someone else in his heart. You should only be guessing. Why does Manor Lord Gung want to deal with my Jojo? Emolian continued faintly. You probably know a little, but I'm afraid you don't know the specifics of what he's done. Based on your relationship as husband and wife, Manor Lord Gung shouldn't have told you about the missions he took on outside of Skyfate, right? The person Gung Pengcheng wants to protect at all costs. Your love rival, that Mu family member, although she didn't do anything, she easily stole your husband's heart. Your life is truly pitiful, always living under the shadow of another person. You're in pain, you're struggling, and you're tormented, but to Manor Lord Gung, you're as insignificant as a speck of dust. You won't attract any of his attention. You've fallen deeply in love with your husband for decades, but unfortunately, the person you love is willing to sacrifice everything for another woman, even to the point of self-detonating his spiritual sense. When Emolien's venomous tongue flared up, not to mention a mentally wounded woman, even someone with a strong psychological resistance wouldn't be able to withstand it. Shut up! Feng Lan screamed agitatedly. Arbor opened her small mouth and looked up at her husband with adoration. Heavens! Her husband had actually guessed correctly. Emolien lowered his head to look at the little fellow, and he tapped her small head lightly with a finger in amusement. Jojo was good at everything, but she was always a bit muddle-headed when it came to matters of the heart. If you want her to guess why Gung Pengcheng self-detonated, she might as well kill Gung Pengcheng directly. With her EQ, it was impossible for her to understand why Gung Pengcheng would go to such lengths for a woman. Oh, maybe she wouldn't even be able to guess that the person Gung Pengcheng wanted to protect was a woman. Why should I shut up? Mo Lien continued to provoke the woman. You pitiful and sad woman. Have you ever thought that the man you're risking everything to take revenge for has never cared about you in his entire life? You're really wishful thinking. Hu Shurchin was speechless. This guy's mouth was really poisonous. Even a man like him couldn't stand it, let alone this crazy woman in front of him. Feng Lan's mind was filled with the thought that he had self-detonated. He had self-detonated. His spiritual sense had self-detonated. He had detonated his spiritual sense for that woman. He wasn't killed by someone else, but by his own self-detonation. He blew himself up. Although the young man in front of him had a vicious mouth, there was one thing he was right about. She had taken over Gung Pengcheng's position and worked hard to take revenge. However, in Gung Pengcheng's heart, he probably didn't care whether she would take revenge for him or not. But even if he told her this, even if that was the case, she still couldn't control her final feelings. She was like a burning devil's snare, poisonous but beautiful. Perhaps only death would be her final destination. Shut up. I don't want to listen to you anymore. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Feng Lan let out a shrill shriek as her eyes turned red. Arbor looked at her crazy appearance and couldn't help but sigh softly. Chapter 2186. Emolien coldly glanced at Feng Lan. Do you know why he blew himself up? Because your love rival, that woman's subordinate, wanted to betray her and say that woman's name. In the end, Gung Pengcheng hugged your love rival's subordinate and blew himself up, taking that subordinate with him to the afterlife. Look, how much he cherished your love rival. Feng Lan's eyes were bloodshot. Sure Huixin. Sure Huixin. I won't let you off, you bitch. Bitch, bitch. She screamed crazily. This scream came from the bottom of her heart. Sure Huixin. Arbor coldly said this stranger's name. In all these years, she had never heard of this name. This name, which Emolien spent a lot of effort to trick out of Feng Lan's mouth, was Sure Huixin. Was she her mother's former enemy? Was she also her current enemy? Emolien was holding his wife, so he naturally knew that the little fellow's emotions were fluctuating, and her breathing was fluctuating. Thus, he lowered his head and whispered in her ear, Don't take it too seriously. Maybe Shi Huixin is an imaginary enemy that Feng Lan conjectured herself. This matter still needs to be investigated, so I'll have someone do it. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Separated by a layer of defensive firewall and 2 layers of ebony defensive array, although Feng Lan couldn't clearly hear what the two were whispering about. She was already in a deranged state, and she screamed angrily out of humiliation. All of you, shut up! Arbor coldly glanced at her and didn't say anything. Just as Emolien said, whether everything was true or not still needed further investigation. She didn't want to listen to Feng Lan's one-sided story. Of course, if this woman, Shi Huixin, really had a problem, she wouldn't let her off. Jojo. Emolien reached out and stroked the hair on her temples, saying softly, "Don't worry. I'm here for everything." Arbor nodded and turned to look at Feng Lan, who was in a deranged state. Feng Lan was greatly shocked. At this time, she was still unable to recover from the news that Gung Pengcheng had self-destructed because of that woman. She raised her hand crazily, and a few servants immediately pulled the mechanism of the catapult with a sullen face. After a few whooshing sounds, the entire catapult trembled slightly, and several balls of spiritual energy were launched out with a series of bangs. Like shooting stars, several spiritual energy balls landed on the defensive talisman matrix that Xiao Mu had set up with a thud. The defensive array glyphs were instantly smashed by the spiritual energy ball. The entire array glyphs were instantly turned into fine powder. Arbor coldly glanced over, and his gaze fell on Madame Feng's face, who seemed to have gone mad. "I want all of you to die here today," Madame Feng screamed. Her body was like a willow leaf, trembling in the wind. "Arbor, die!" Madame Feng screamed and waved her hand heavily. Immediately, 4 or 5 spirit energy balls rushed towards the defensive array glyphs set up in Arbor under her command. Boom! The entire array glyphs were once again turned into nothingness in this violent tremor. At this point, the 2 layers of array glyphs set up by Arbor were completely destroyed by the spiritual energy balls. Xiao Mu creased her brows and swept an indifferent glance at Madame Neifeng. This person wasn't a cultivator. She was just an ordinary woman who had coincidentally obtained the special ability of speed and strength. Originally, it was impossible for her to break Arbor's double array glyphs by herself. Chapter 2187. Arbor glanced at Madame Feng in displeasure. Just as she was about to throw out more defensive array glyphs, Emolien reached out and pressed down on her small hand. "Wait a moment," he said softly as he held her hand. 1 or 2 of these spiritual energy balls couldn't break Jojo's defensive array glyphs. But releasing several of them in a row with this kind of dispenser was very powerful. He didn't want Jojo's defensive array glyphs to be broken by that woman every time. Rather than letting his wife waste her energy, it was better for him to deal with this woman. He waved his hand, and clusters of gorgeous red flames jumped between his fingers like dancing fairies. Xiao Mu raised her head to look at him. She saw these clusters of small flames that resembled fairies slowly fusing together. Then, a purple flame sprang up from within and completely merged with the scarlet flame. Whoosh! That flame pounced at Feng Lan as fast as lightning. Feng Lan shouted loudly, "This kind of speed can't hurt me at all." Just as she finished speaking, Feng Lan felt as if she was hit by a huge force. Her entire body was instantly enveloped by heat. The red and purple flames completely wrapped around her limbs, giving off steaming hot flames. Feng Lan felt as if her bones were placed on top of a bonfire, and she couldn't move at all. Damn it, there was definitely something strange about the man in front of her. His fire spiritual energy was completely different from others. She was actually slapped in the face. This thought flashed through Feng Lan's mind with grief and indignation. Her special abilities of speed and strength were completely useless in front of those who were truly supreme in terms of strength. Feng Lan didn't know that Emolien's fire spiritual energy was mixed with medicinal power. Naturally, it was different from others. Roar, roar. The special-grade zombie named Ali suddenly roared, and a small spatial whirlpool suddenly appeared in front of Emolien. This whirlpool disappeared as quickly as it appeared. When Arbor reached out to grab it, Prince Mo's figure actually quickly disappeared in that whirlpool. This female zombie actually grasped the special ability of teleportation. Arbor looked at her dear husband, who was teleported away with a stunned expression. She was so angry that her head hurt. Her husband was taken away by a demon. This simply made her feel unwell. The little fellow didn't expect that this bald female zombie had actually comprehended a special ability. This was something she had never seen before. Her husband. Arbor waved out hundreds of butterflies and shouted in exasperation, "Go find that bald female zombie." Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A group of butterflies immediately flapped their wings and flew in all directions. At the same time, Hall Master Gong's group, who had already retreated from the valley. Gong coldly glanced at the bottom of the cliff. "Hall Master, do you want to burn the entire valley below?" Wu Meng made a gesture of setting fire to the valley. Hall Master Gong glanced at him indifferently, and the fat man called Wu Meng immediately stopped talking, because he knew when he needed to speak and when he needed him to shut up. Just like now, Hall Master's meaning was very clear. He didn't want to make Arbor's group an enemy for the time being. Since that was the case, as a subordinate, it wasn't convenient for him to say anything. "How should we report to Master about Ali when we return?" Wu Meng couldn't help but ask. Hall Master Gong turned around and glanced at him indifferently. "What's there to report?" Chapter 2188. Wu Meng was slightly taken aback. Hall Master Gong glanced at him and said coldly, "I'll tell you the truth. Ali, this failed evolution product, doesn't have many days left to live." This was the first time Wu Meng had heard of this. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Is what Hall Master said true?" Hall Master Gong nodded with a cold expression. "Master has long since given up on this failed product. When this special class zombie was promoted to rank 2, she was given many precious medicines. Among them was a medicinal liquid specially used to promote special abilities. This special class zombie comprehended the special ability of spatial teleportation. Unfortunately, the teleportation range is limited to 100 feet, so it's practically useless. Her special ability was different from ordinary people's, which could be upgraded by absorbing the crystal cores in low-class zombies' brains. Her special ability was permanent. Her special ability would remain at whatever level it was supposed to be. She wouldn't be able to upgrade even half a step until she died. Therefore, although this person had become a special class zombie, it was useless. Her special ability level hadn't reached special class at all. Hall Master Gong silently looked up at the completely darkened sky. "Let's go." This valley couldn't be used anymore. The Shuntian Sentinels were almost completely wiped out here. However, this didn't matter to Hall Master Gong. Since Master had given the order, then they should give up. Wu Meng turned back and looked deeply at the valley before following Hall Master Gong's footsteps. With the two of them leaving like this, it meant that they had completely given up on the Shuntian Sentinels and special class zombies. Of course, to them, Feng Lan was an existence they could do without. However, they couldn't help but feel that it was a pity for the 100,000 elite soldiers that they had painstakingly nurtured. After the two of them left, the deep valley below was still covered by smoke. The poisonous insects and creatures in the valley seemed to have sensed something as they all crawled out of their nests and scrambled to climb up the cliff. For some reason, it felt like a storm was about to come. Feng Chun strode up to Qiao Mu and stared at her small face that was flushed red from anger. Suppressing the laughter in his heart, he coughed lightly and reassured, "Don't worry. That female zombie's ability is limited. This venerable one doesn't think they can move too far." "This baldy caught my husband." Arbor was exasperated. She was really angry. That female monster had actually taken her husband away in front of her. How preposterous. Feng Chun coughed lightly when she heard this. "I don't think that spatial vortex is too big. I estimate that it's only about 100 feet in diameter. It won't exceed that by too much. Why don't we split up and look for it?" Arbor shook his head and looked at the black poison-tailed butterflies fluttering in the air. He said softly, "Let's go. We already have a direction." Feng Chun nodded and turned to give Dao Wuji and the others a look, telling them to continue to stay here and exterminate the corpse puppets that had lost their minds. He called little Taisui and followed Jojo and the poison-tailed butterfly to Emolien. The poison-tailed butterfly fluttered its wings and quickly led Arbor's group to a place. Walking into the valley from the valley, there was a small, gurgling stream. Both paths were filled with lush trees. Behind the layers of trees, there was an old wooden house hidden in the middle. Arbor pushed aside the branches and rushed over. In the end, she saw a scene that made her very angry. Chapter 2189. The bald demoness had found a red veil from somewhere and covered her head. She was determined to grab Emolien's hand. Emolien dodged her several times, but was strangely trapped in the 4 small vortexes. No matter where he dodged, there was always the possibility of being sucked in. Arbor! Exclamation point. On the other hand, Fengchen couldn't resist laughing. My heavens! This zombie is disguised as a ghost. Does it want to marry Emolien? Arbor quickly walked toward her husband. She originally wanted to avoid the spatial vortexes and fly to her husband's side, but the vortexes were very strange. Once a person got close, they would be sucked in by an endless suction force. Miss Chow was furious. She looked coldly at the bald female zombie with the red veil, who was desperately trying to pounce to her husband's side. She was courting death. Chow Mu's gaze harshly shot out a burst of water spiritual energy at the bald female zombie's back. The water spirit rippled into the air and instantly turned into millions of ice shards, which shot toward the bald female zombie's head. This sudden attack forced the female zombie to give up on pursuing Emolien, and she could only turn around to deal with Chow Mu first. Arbor naturally wouldn't be polite with this monster. After the first wave of ice shards, the second wave came. Arbor had basically reached the point of perfection in the use of water and wood spirit power. Thus, it was a piece of cake for her to consecutively unleash instantaneous attacks. Roar, roar, roar! After being smashed by 3 waves of ice rain, the special class zombie fell backward, dizzy and disoriented. With a wave of Chow Mu's small hand, rows of earth spikes burrowed out from under the special level zombie's feet and abruptly transformed into several hundred confinement vines, firmly binding this special level zombie's legs within the vines. Ah! Ah! This zombie could actually let out a very human-like scream. Arbor couldn't help but look at her a few more times. Compared to any of the corpse puppets in the past, the one in front of him clearly had a complete intelligence. She could even look at him with resentment in her eyes. However, a corpse puppet was still a corpse puppet. She was something that could be resurrected after death. Her value was very, very low. Roar! The special grade zombie lifted the red veil on its head and glared at Arbor in front of it. He seemed to be resentful that she had rushed over at such a critical juncture. Her wedding ceremony was ruined by this woman again. This vicious woman. It was her who had turned her into this state that was neither human nor ghost. It was her. He ordered her to be pushed down from the city gate tower to be fed to the zombies, making her suffer pain and torture before she died. Such a vicious woman was actually able to win Prince Mo's affections, and he actually treated her like the apple of his eye. On what basis? How was she inferior to this unruly, willful, arrogant, and unbridled woman in front of her? She, Wei Mingli, refused to accept this. Arbor's thoughts suddenly moved, and the startled swan dagger suddenly appeared and pierced through the special class zombie's left shoulder blade. As a corpse puppet, she naturally didn't feel any pain, but the startled swan dagger was no ordinary item. Therefore, after being pierced by the startled swan dagger, the bald female corpse puppet suddenly felt that her entire left arm couldn't move. It was unbearably stiff. After all, ever since she had advanced to become a special class zombie, her entire body was no different from a human's flexibility. But now, a trace of anger flashed across the bald female's face. Chapter 2190. Damn it! Finally, Chow Mu heard the bald female zombie's words clearly. As expected, this zombie already had emotions of its own and could even curse people. Arbor glanced at her curiously and then instinctively asked, "Do you have memories of when you were a human?" Roar! The female zombie roared angrily at Arbor. Her eyes flickered with a bone-deep hatred. Yes, she wanted nothing more than to kill Arbor right now. However, this woman's strength was several notches higher than before. It would be very difficult to kill her if she didn't succeed in one hit. Wei Mingli, Wei Mingli. The female zombie roared these words in a very strange voice. Xiao Mu expended a great deal of effort before realizing that the 3 words she said were Wei something Li. Arbor carefully sized her up again and shook his head. I don't know you. Fortunately, Wei Mingli couldn't be considered a human in essence. Thus, she didn't explode in anger at Arbor, but her eyes were filled with a strange look. At the same time, Emolien finally broke free of the 4-layered space vortex set up by Wei Mingli with several lotus marks. She turned to look at Arbor. He hurriedly flew to her side, but before he could say anything to his wife, Wei Mingli was already beside him. On the side, Wei Mingli seemed to have been bewitched, pouncing on Crown Prince Mo the moment she saw him. This hungry tiger pouncing on its prey was extremely large. Arbor's eyelids twitched at the sight. Without thinking too much, he directly sent a flying kick towards Wei something Li. What are you doing? Not only did this whimsical female zombie want to secretly marry Emolien, but she also wanted to pounce on her husband right in front of her. She simply didn't know what death was. On the other side, Wei Mingli, who was blocked by Arbor, was 100 times more furious and tormented than Arbor, especially when she saw Prince Mo walk over and naturally wrap his arm around the little girl's waist. Wei Mingli felt the world's malice toward her. His eyes were still so focused. Wei Mingli reflexively touched her vein-covered cheek. His face was truly frightening. Walking on the streets at night would probably scare people to death. In the past, when she was as beautiful as a flower, the crown prince didn't even spare her a glance, let alone now. But she couldn't accept it. Arbor. That little bitch. She didn't even remember who she was. Since that was the case, a vicious glint flitted across Wei Mingli's eyes. Wei Mingli abruptly jumped to her feet and screamed, I'll let you completely remember who I am. Wei Mingli suddenly stretched out her hands and raised them toward the sky. Immediately, 7 or 8 spatial vortexes appeared around Arbor. It wanted to suck her in. Scram. Arbor couldn't help but get angry. This female corpse puppet actually wanted to transfer her out of here? He wanted to occupy her lotus with all his heart. Jojo. Emolien only felt her heart skip a beat, and she was about to pounce over. Suddenly, a person rushed out from the side and pressed down on Arbor at an incomparably fast speed, forcefully flipping her to the ground. At the same time, Arbor only felt that the figure pressing down on top of her seemed to be squeezed by spatial power and vibrated. With a pft, she spat out a mouthful of blood. That person's aura instantly turned from strong to weak, becoming dispirited. Arbor narrowed her eyes at the woman pressing down on top of her, and her gaze couldn't help but become angry. Who told you to act on your own and save me? Sleep. Chapter 2191. Die! A dark red glint flashed through Arbor's eyes. In a split second, the soil in front of the female zombie started rolling, and countless rocks rained down on her head. Bam, bam, bam. After several bangs, Wei Mingli struggled and screamed. She barely revealed half her face from under the jagged rocks and screamed at Arbor. Arbor, Arbor, you'll die a horrible death. Wei Mingli mumbled these words. To be honest, Miss Chow couldn't hear a single word clearly. Her eyes were filled with the blood on her hands. This blood wasn't her own, but Yi Lingmin's. Yi Lingmin's body was stained with blood, and she was barely breathing. She looked like she wouldn't die in this world. Arbor looked down at her. He stretched out his small hand and immediately stuffed several pills into Yi Lingmin's mouth. At the same time, he raised countless sharp ice spikes with his right hand and pierced them toward the bald female zombie's head. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Wei Mingli roared. Now that she was crushed under a pile of rocks, she was like a target. Naturally, the ice spikes hit her accurately. Hundreds of ice spikes immediately pierced her into a sieve. Boom! Wei Mingli's strength suddenly surged, and she abruptly shifted the pile of rocks on top of her. However, before he could get up, he felt that his limbs were entangled by endless vines. They wrapped around her tightly, layer upon layer. She tried her best to break free, but unfortunately, after breaking free of one layer, dozens of layers of vines wrapped around her again. From afar, Wei Mingli seemed to have become a giant cocoon. Arbor knew that Feng Chan had made a move, so he immediately summoned the startled swan dagger, while Wei Mingli was entangled by the giant vines. The startled swan dagger buzzed in the air. It was connected to its master's mind, and it swiftly stabbed toward Wei Mingli's head. Ah! Wei Mingli let out a piercing scream. Being stabbed in the head by the startled swan dagger was no joke. However, Wei Mingli was already a special-grade zombie, and her head was much harder than any other zombies. The startled swan dagger failed to pierce through the special-grade corpse puppet's vital points, but it did cause some damage to her. This made Wei Mingli a little scared. She originally thought that after her body was made into a monster like a corpse puppet, both her strength and speed would be greatly improved. She even obtained a very rare dimensional vortex arcana. But now, she suddenly felt that she might not be as strong and invincible as she thought. She seemed to be able to die too. When Arbor realized that Wei Mingli hadn't been stabbed to death by the startled swan dagger, she couldn't help but frown. This female zombie named Wei something Li seemed to have a brain structure that was very different from other low-level zombies. Just now, when the startled swan dagger pierced over, it actually could not pierce her in the slightest. His head was like an iron plate and he couldn't go in at all. Arbor narrowed his eyes at Wei Mingli, feeling a little angry. The startled swan dagger was no ordinary spiritual weapon. Mo Lien said that it was a growth-type weapon. In other words, as her cultivation level rose, this spiritual weapon could very likely advance to a divine weapon or even a holy weapon. Yet, this startled swan dagger actually couldn't kill that zombie. Qiao Mu clenched her fists and lowered her head to look at the silent Yi Lingmin. Chapter 2192. When she looked up to stare at the female zombie again, her eyes were already below the freezing point. A mere zombie dares to be so arrogant in front of me. Did she really think that there was nothing she could do to her? Arbor had already lost all patience with this fellow in front of him. He directly summoned a dozen or so explosive birds from Paradise Planet and had them carry out a suicidal explosion on Wei Mingli. The pile of rocks was blasted into pieces. Wei Mingli was sent flying by the shockwave. Mo Lien's finger moved, and a sharp arrow formed from purple flames instantly shot out. It only took one exchange before it burrowed out of Wei Mingli's head. Wei Mingli wanted to scream, but it was already too late. Her head was instantly like a watermelon that had been cut open. Half of it fell off one side, splitting into two in an instant. The way she died was very disgusting. Arbor swept a glance before retracting his gaze. Mo Lien's sharp arrow of purple flames just so happened to aim at Wei Mingli's head, and it completely pierced through. Wei Mingli's terrified and incredulous gaze before she was completely done for was quite hilarious. What was there for her to be frightened and unable to understand? Could it be that she thought that Mo Lien would have tender, protective feelings for her? Simply laughable. From start to finish, Arbor still couldn't recall who this Wei Mingli was. Instead, it was the crown prince who remembered. This woman was precisely the bait used to feed the zombies when the Mo Kingdom capital was besieged by zombies. But all of this didn't matter anymore. Since his Jojo couldn't recall, then he shouldn't think about it. In any case, the trouble had already been resolved. Cough, cough, cough. Yi Lingmin coughed violently and slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Qiao Mu's small, taut face. What did you run out for? Arbor reflexively grasped her wrist. You were corroded by the spatial compression force. You can't be saved, do you understand? Cough, cough. Yi Lingmin nodded with a bitter smile. Even if you didn't come out, nothing would have happened to me. Arbor said angrily. Yes. Yi Lingmin nodded weakly. Arbor pursed his lips and stared at her. Aren't you afraid of death? I'm afraid of death, junior sister. Yi Lingmin said with some difficulty. I only know, but I never thought that I would be able to see master and martial uncles after I die. Being able to see all my senior and junior sisters, I feel very comfortable in my heart. Are you stupid? Second Antmaster and the 200 Holy Water Sect disciples are all alive and well. Where are you going to see them? Arbor wanted to punch her, but he didn't know where to start. Although Yi Lingmin didn't seem to have any external injuries after being squeezed by the power of space, it was obvious that her internal injuries were extremely serious. Her 5 viscera and 6 bowels had probably been crushed into powder under the spatial compression. Now he was just barely holding on to his last breath, hanging on to a little bit of his spirit, and talking to her like a dying flash. If Yi Lingmin hadn't rushed over and blocked the attack for her, she would have died. Qiao Mu was very clear in her heart that she was probably going to run out of luck. Wei Mingli, this zombie, was more than just a little stronger than other people. She was unable to heal Yi Lingmin's injuries. Her 5 viscera and 6 bowels were already shattered, so there was no way to save her. Unless she could refine the crisis reversal pill now, perhaps she could save Yi Lingmin's life. Chapter 2193. However, it was a pity that being in a hurry could not put out a nearby fire. Looking at Arbor's dejected appearance, Yi Lingmin forced a smile. Don't be sad, little junior sister. I've been looking forward to this day for a full 3 years. This time, cough cough cough, I can finally be free. I can finally go to the netherworld. I also have the face to see Master. Yi Lingmin, who allowed you to die? Hang in there, Arbor said angrily. Don't think that dying is enough. You've done such a wrong thing. Why you still have to continue atoning for your sins? Continue. Arbor spoke incoherently. Unexpectedly, Yi Lingmin reached out to hold her small hand. Little junior sister, Yi Lingmin said softly. Forgive me, okay? Arbor pursed her lips and did not say anything. Yi Lingmin could not resist sighing. I will personally go down to the netherworld to atone for my sins. Yi Lingmin, Yi Lingmin. Arbor resisted the urge to grab her and anxiously shouted. You must have the will to live. Yi Lingmin, Yi. Yi Lingmin glanced at her one last time and said with a smile, Why, little junior sister? I still remember the first time we met at the Holy Water Sect. You pounced on me and used a bamboo chopstick to almost stab my eyes. You were really dazzling back then? Yi Lingmin said softly, her eyes starting to slacken. Yi Lingmin, Yi. Arbor pursed her lips and did her best to hold back her tears. Yi Lingmin, the life-extending pill I gave you is so precious. You should at least hang in there for me. Hang in there for 4 hours so I can think of another way. Yi Lingmin could no longer hear Arbor's voice calling for her. In front of her eyes, like water ripples, a scene of a busy street appeared. She could clearly see the subtle expressions on everyone's faces. She could see the wrinkles at the corners of a plump woman's eyes, and the blushes that the girls had put on. She had been squatting in the corner, hugging her knees. She had been squatting there for 2 days and 3 nights. He felt so hungry that he was about to explode. She was hungry, 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 hungry. Her eyes were like a little beast's as she stared at the hibiscus cake in a child's hand. Suddenly, like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey, he snatched the hibiscus cake and wolfed it down. Wah! The child's cries immediately attracted the attention of the child's mother. The child's mother was probably as big as a small hill. He picked her up and slapped her to the ground. Punches and kicks landed on her small body, kicking her until she almost doubted life. Just when she thought she was going to die, a heavenly voice said, What a shameless bully. Following that, the auntie, who was as sturdy as a small mountain, was sent flying by someone. That was really a flying kick. She raised her little head and giggled as she watched the auntie being kicked to the roof and hanging there. Although she was spitting blood, she still clapped her little hands happily. Look, the person who hit him was beaten up, right? Therefore, what mother taught was not wrong. Those who bully others will be bullied back one day. She raised her little face, her eyes shining as she looked at the woman in front of her. Chapter 2194. She felt that she probably wouldn't be able to forget this woman for the rest of her life. Her red clothes were alluring, and her face was exquisite and magnificent. She was like a blooming flower of flames, so dazzling that she almost couldn't turn her eyes away. She seemed to hear the woman's gentle voice. "Are you willing to follow me to the holy water sect?" She nodded. At the same time, Yi Lingmin, who was gradually losing consciousness, also nodded. At some point in time, Yang Shirong was silently standing next to Arbor. She dazedly looked at Yi Lingmin, who was slowly walking away with a smile. Yi Lingmin seemed to have fallen asleep with a smile on her lips. No one knew that she seemed to be immersed in a dream right now. In this dream, she wantonly let herself wander further and further away. She still remembered that it was truly a cold winter that year. Master bought her a set of cotton-padded jacket and trousers from a ready-made clothing store and wrapped her up like a Fulu doll. At that time, she saw her walking with a blue and white umbrella in front of her. She abruptly turned around and waved at her with a smile. "Come here quickly." Yi Lingmin felt that Murong Sun was incomparably beautiful at that time. There was probably no one in this world who could compare to her. She only wanted to work hard to become the best disciple in Master's heart. She only was unwilling to lose to little junior sister. She only wanted Master to look at her more. She wanted Master to feel proud every time she mentioned Yi Lingmin. Unfortunately, it was an extravagant hope in the end. Yi Lingmin quietly left with a faint smile. Arbor reached out to touch her breathing. He bit his lips and angrily said, "Yi Lingmin, who told you to die?" Yang Shirong couldn't help but sigh. Let her die. This child didn't have the slightest will to live anymore. The reason why she flew out to protect Jojo today was most likely because she was prepared to die. If that's the case, then just let her be. Arbor lowered his head and reflexively tightly grasped Yi Lingmin's hand. "Senior, Sister Yi." Yang Shirong patted Arbor's head. "Jojo, don't be sad. This is Yi Lingmin's own choice. In the end, it all started because of her." Yang Shirong sighed. "Let her be the one to end it." Arbor lowered his head and said nothing. Yang Shirong couldn't help but sigh. "Jojo, the dead are gone. What we need to do now is to look to the future." Arbor nodded. She understood the logic, but understanding was one thing. Seeing Yi Lingmin die with her own eyes was another. She really hated this senior sister in her heart. But watching her die with his own eyes, he felt very sad. It wasn't easy for the Holy Water sect to reach this point. Arbor said in a low voice, "I hope that from now on, we won't have any more disciples making unnecessary sacrifices." She hoped that from now on, everyone in the Holy Water sect would be neat and tidy, and not a single person would be missing. Yang Shirong patted her head in relief. "If it's our Jojo, I believe you can do it." After Second Antmaster said this, she glared fiercely at Prince Mo, who was trying to walk up and interrupt their conversation. Mo Lien glanced at Second Antmaster aggrievedly. When she saw Arbor looking over, she hurriedly flew over and hugged her, shouting, "Jojo, Second Antmaster glared at me again just now. Do you have any fucking shame?" Second Antmaster rolled her eyes grumpily at the sky. Xiao Mu was tormented by the two people's jesting, but half of the sorrow in her heart was washed away. Chapter 2195. "Jojo," Emolien said angrily. "Second Uncle Master doesn't like me." Arbor looked at her husband sympathetically. "Husband, there's a reason why Second Uncle Master doesn't like you." "What's the reason?" Emolien asked curiously. "You're beautiful." Arbor raised her small hand and stroked his chin, then floated away. Emolien! Exclamation point. Was he being teased by his wife? Yang Shirong. Arbor came to Yi Lingmin's side and put her bones into the peach blossom slope, then asked Little Tree to bury Yi Lingmin beside her senior sisters. Yi Lingmin's matter was considered to be over. Just as Second Uncle Master said, it was impossible to save a person who had lost the will to live no matter how much you wanted to. Reporting to the Crown Princess, we found the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord in the dungeon. "Bring them up." Xiao Mu reflexively looked behind Tong's group. Reporting to the Crown Prince. The Shuntian Prefecture's people are basically under control. 1/3 of them have already mutated into zombie puppets. We're still not sure if the other 2/3 have mutated or not. When Emolien heard this, he nodded and said, Then deal with the mutated zombie puppets. As for the remaining people, isolate them for the time being. If symptoms appear, kill them. The subordinate nodded in agreement and left to carry out the order. Arbor looked up at Prince Mo and reached out a small paw. Emolien looked at her in amusement and naturally reached out to grab her hand, pulling her to his side. What's wrong? When are we going to the Divine Lands? She really wanted to try her ship that could cross the 3 states and 6 prefectures. She wondered if the old man was bragging so well. Was it completely effortless to cross the Divine Lands? This was something that would only be known after trying. Eliminate the remaining military forces of the Shuntian prefecture. Let Dunzu take charge here. In this way, there was no need to worry that Shuntian prefecture would stab Jojo in the back again. Xiao Mu nodded when she heard this. Turning his head, he saw Dunzong being carried out. This was really flattering. Emolien's 2 subordinates found a rattan chair and carried Duanzong, whose body was tilted, over. Beside Dunju was a skinny, dark-skinned boy. His eyes were full of spirit, and he was very clever. Arbor looked at his miserable appearance and couldn't help but cough softly and ask him, "How are you?" "Dunzhong." It would have been better if he didn't ask. But once he did, Dungeon almost jumped up from the rattan chair. Unfortunately, he didn't have the strength to do so, so he hadn't even lifted a finger yet. This person was covered in cuts and bruises from head to toe. He looked extremely miserable. Standing beside him was a skinny, dark-skinned man. Arbor glanced at him, and the boy immediately bowed respectfully to her. "Respected miss, my name is Meng Mai. Thank you for saving me previously." Arbor nodded at him and glanced at the listless Dungeon. "You saved him?" Meng Mai nodded his little head. "I am now the Prefecture Lord's personal bodyguard. Since the Prefecture Lord doesn't despise me for being young, Meng Mai will naturally do my best for the Prefecture Lord." Arbor glanced at Dungeon with disdain. She didn't know what flowery words this guy used to trick this child into working for him. When Dungeon saw Arbor's gaze, he immediately became unhappy. "Little master, why are you looking down on me?" Chapter 2196. Why would I need a reason to despise you? Arbor gave him a look that said, "Figure it out yourself." Then he walked to Dunju and squatted down. Reaching out to check his pulse, Arbor stared at Dunju for a while. Dunju immediately started to look nervous. "What's wrong with my body? Is there a problem? How could this be? Can't you tell what's wrong with me?" This guy was scaring himself for no reason. Before Arbor could say anything, he was already yelling, "Little master, don't scare me. I finally have a body. I don't want my body to be taken away in less than 3 days." Arbor turned to look at him, threw his hand away, and said expressionlessly, "The coating on your tongue is a little yellow. Have you been heaty lately? You also have stomach pains from time to time." "Ah, yes. Tun Tun immediately put on a fawning look and praised, "Little master, your medical skills are really unparalleled." Arbor couldn't be bothered with this bootlicker and said, "You have to eat at least 2 meals a day. I'll prescribe you some medicine for gastrointestinal problems later. Remember to take it on time." Dunju nodded. After Arbor threw down the prescription and left with Emolien. Only then did Dunzong exclaim, God, he was fooled by Jojo. Since the topic had changed, he had forgotten to pour out his grievances and strongly request for a change of body. Ah, he was such a pig. He knew that the couple was a scam. In the end, they led him into the trap with just a few words. He completely forgot about the important matter he wanted to ask. Ah! Dunju was so angry that he pounded the armrest of the chair back and forth. He couldn't help but yell in the direction the couple left. "Little master, come back here. This little guy is really troublesome." Emolien looked down at Arbor and reached out to touch his head. "Jojo, what did you say just now?" "It's just a trick," Arbor said expressionlessly. "Eating it won't hurt anyway. There is nothing wrong with his body. The main thing is that his external injuries are more serious. When the time comes, I will teach Meng Mai and let him help Dun Shu apply the wound." Emolien held back her laughter and nodded. Dun Tun was right. The little guy was really cunning. The two of them found a place where the sun was shining and sat down, waiting for Tong's report. After half an incense stick's worth of time, Tong came running over with his men. "Your Highness, the big and small corpse puppets have been eliminated." Lien nodded. "Pack up and get ready to leave." Everyone immediately decided to leave the valley. Before leaving, Lien set a small fire in the valley. Prince Mo had reinforced a hidden barrier around the valley to prevent the fire from spreading. After doing all this, the young couple held hands and was about to leave. Lien instinctively leaned towards Jojo and glared at Yang Shirong. "This is my Jojo. Second Uncle Master, you're not going to break us up, are you?" "That's not right, Second Uncle Master. Jojo and I love each other more than gold. Our feelings for each other are strong." As Lien spoke, she clasped Arbor's small hand tightly. After saying a few words, she lowered her head and asked Arbor, "Is it Jojo?" Arbor instinctively nodded. "No one can separate us." "Is it Jojo?" Xiao Mu dazedly nodded her head again. "Second Uncle Master, your cold expression is very strange." Lien huffed angrily. Chapter 2197. Jojo likes me so much. If she doesn't have me, what will she do? Am I right, Jojo? Xiao Mu might have been listening to what Lien was saying at the beginning, but after he spoke so much, Xiao Mu only nodded her head as per her usual habit. She simply didn't listen to what this guy was saying. Prince Mo already knew about this habit of Jojo's. Hence, he said a series of words, and sure enough, the little guy followed suit and nodded. Yang Shirong, who was standing at the side, was so angry that she laughed at Lien. It was obvious that this guy had figured out Jojo's pattern and was waiting to trick her. Second Martial Ant looked unhappy and reached out to pull Arbor to her side. "Jojo, you're so silly. If you get sold, you'll have to pay back the money." Arbor wanted to say that she was silly, but on account of Second Martial Ant's face, she didn't argue. Yang Shirong pulled Arbor and flew out of the valley. Along the way, she couldn't help but exhort, "Jojo, you're still young. Don't be in such a hurry to get married." Second Martial Ant, "I've been married for a long time." Yang Shirong was speechless. What a disappointing little guy. Second Antmaster grumpily glared at Xiao Mu. When he glanced back and saw that Lien had caught up, he quickly grabbed Xiao Mu's small hand and sped up. Lien was so angry that she laughed. What was Second Martial Ant trying to do? She was trying to stir up trouble. His Jojo. Lien's Jojo was pulled away by Second Martial Ant Yang Shirong. From a distance, the little guy looked back at him reluctantly. Then he waved at him. "Lien, I'll leave everything here to you." Lien was speechless. Why did she suddenly have a strange sense of danger? Jojo's family was not easy to get along with. They were not as honest as Chao Zhongbong and his wife. Not easy to deal with. Lien sighed and looked up at the bright sky. Swoosh. His figure immediately vanished. After returning to the inn, Yang Shirong patted her little niece's head and said with a smile, "Do you want to go into seclusion? From what I see, you should stabilize your cultivation level first." Arbor opened her small mouth and was about to speak when Prince Mo entered through the window. Without saying a word, he rushed out of the window with his little wife in his arms. Yang Shirong looked at the window in confusion. Was she hallucinating just now? Lien, that bastard was like a fucking robber. He just grabbed his wife and ran away. What kind of crown prince was this unreliable guy? It's him. Forget it. On the other side, Yang Shirong was secretly ridiculing Lien's actions. On the other side, Lien, who was hugging his little wife, couldn't help but sigh in relief. "Wife, what?" Arbor glared at the man in annoyance. "Second Martial Uncle is talking to me. We have to pack up and go to the Divine Land. Time is of the essence. We have to leave now." Arbor's two black eyes widened in an instant. "But husband, didn't you just say that you have to wait until Dunzhong has completely mastered the affairs of Shuntian Prefecture and wipe out the remaining forces? Whoever wants to do that can do it. His wife is still the most important. His wife is about to run away because of Second Martial Uncle's instigation. How can he not be anxious? Take out your little boat. Let's not bother about second Marshal uncle. Let's go. Why did this normal couple make it seem like they were eloping? Arbor felt a little incredulous. Run away without second Marshal uncle's knowledge? Chapter 2198. Are you sure you won't be beaten to death by second Uncle Master? Why do you care so much? Emolien hugged his little wife and said anxiously, There's no time like the present. Let's set off today. Why, you're so quick-witted. It's too hilarious. Xiao Mu gazed at her dear hubby speechlessly. Hubby. She looked at him seriously and raised her hands to pull his neck down. No matter what second Uncle Master says, we're still husband and wife. Why are you in such a hurry? When Yang Shirong came over, she happened to hear this. She was so angry that her teeth ached. Although Emolien, that punk, was pretty good in all aspects. But in Yang Shirong's eyes, this guy was just someone to make do with. If her martial niece didn't like him, no matter how many Emoliens were stacked together, he wouldn't be good enough for her Qiao. Sensing that second Uncle Master was looking down on him, Emolien cautiously leaned toward Arbor and looked at second Uncle Master warily. Jojo, your second Uncle Master doesn't like me again. Arbor nodded her little head. You're beautiful. She doesn't think you're that reliable. Emolien. What kind of weird reason was that? Yang Shirong looked at the couple exasperatedly and asked with her hands behind her back, Tell me the truth. Are you really planning to go to China? The young couple nodded in unison. I'm not asking you. Yang Shirong rebuked Prince Mo angrily. It was all because of this guy's instigation. Otherwise, her Qiao wouldn't have thought of going to China. What was so good about China? She was unfamiliar with the place and people. Moreover, her Qiao was just a little kid. Wasn't it a little unreasonable to venture into China alone? It felt like it was too early. She should at least raise her realm and become a level 10 great spiritual master. Only then would she feel assured. Arbor looked at her Uncle Master's worried gaze and said expressionlessly, Second Uncle Master, don't worry. I'll take you with me. Second Uncle Master was speechless. Let's go to the Divine Land and find a good place for our sect to rebuild. Yang Shirong's eyes brightened. We'll inflict heavy losses on the Holy Water sect in the Divine Province? Why did it sound so tempting? Arbor nodded. Find a divine realm. Build it there. The corners of second Uncle's mouth twitched when he heard this. Jojo, I heard that there are only a few god realms in the entire upper 3 continents. Moreover, the good god territories have basically been taken over by some major forces. Occupied? Arbor blinked and turned to look at Emolien. Husband? Don't worry. Just snatch it. Yang Shirong silently rolled her eyes. She snorted and glanced at the kid. You make it sound so simple. One of the divine realms is under your father's name, right? Really? Emolien was stunned for a moment before she nodded and said, Then let him give us the realm of the gods as a wedding gift. Arbor nodded, agreeing with Prince Mo's words. Yang Shirong's mouth twitched. She looked at Prince Mo and then at their Qiao. She suddenly understood. Why were the two of them so compatible? So it was called the same black-hearted. How could the two of you be so greedy and make it sound like there was no suspense? Just like that divine realm was already in the bag for the two of them, the great emperor of the divine land must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to have such a deceitful son. Yang Shirong rolled her eyes. When are we going? Chapter 2199. In a few days. Immediately. Arbor and Emolien gave different answers at the same time. Yang Shirong glared at Emolien in exasperation. What do you mean immediately? We have to prepare for China. What do we have to prepare? Aren't the things in our inner world? Scram. Second Uncle Master roared like a lion. Emolien looked pitifully at his Qiao. Second Uncle Master roared at me. Arbor quickly patted his hand. That's how second Uncle Master is like. You'll get used to it. Yang Shirong felt that this did not sound like a compliment. She glanced at the couple and continued, Jojo, don't be anxious. It's always good to prepare more. Who knows what you'll face when you go to China? Before Yang Shirong could finish, Emolien waved at her. Second Uncle Master, don't worry. I'll take care of everything. You're the one who's worrying. Yang Shirong snorted. This Mo fellow could even snatch her chow and run away at the inn. Who knew what he would do in the future? The child was all grown up. It was really worrying. Yang Shirong sighed and followed the two of them with her hands behind her back. The next day, Arbor and Emolien slept until late in the morning before they got up. After the two of them finished washing up and were about to go downstairs for lunch, the shopkeeper ran upstairs and respectfully handed the two of them an invitation. Emolien reached out to take it. After turning it over and over to examine it, his lips involuntarily curled into a sneer. Who sent the invitation? Who else could it be? Emolien pulled Arbor's hand and walked downstairs. The one from the Wang family of Jianping. Mo Kuan? Prince Mo nodded. What did he send the invitation for? Emolien's face was full of mockery. She flipped the invitation over and over again. Then, she raised a red flame and burned it to ashes. That person from the Wang family of Jianping said that he was rude to me last time and wanted to use the banquet as an excuse to apologize to me. Oh! Arbor didn't say anything. Emolien looked down at her in amusement. What do you think? Do I have to go? Arbor snorted. What good can there be in those foppish gatherings? Isn't it just singing and dancing and finding some scantily clad women to accompany them? Emolien's eyes lit up. She turned the little guy around to face her. Jojo, are you jealous? Bah! Why would she be jealous? Miss Chow snorted stubbornly and glanced at Prince Mo. Are you still going? The crown prince immediately shook his head. No, no, no. Miss Chow's little face was no longer so tense. Emolien held her little hand and walked down the stairs. Immediately, she saw Second Uncle Master sitting by the window and looking at her with a ladle-like face. She hurriedly pulled Arbor over. Second Uncle Master. Prince Mo bowed respectfully to Yang Shirong. Yang Shirong, who had wanted to rebuke this fellow, was suddenly speechless. This brat always acted obedient in front of Jojo. That face of his really made her unable to get angry. Jojo, if we want to go through the passage in China, we'll have to wait for at least 4 months. No need. Arbor shook her head. I have my own ways to get there. You don't have to worry about this. As she spoke, the wind chimes at the door rang. A dozen or so women with slender waists walked in from outside, walking towards Crown Prince Mo with a clear goal in mind. Chapter 2200. Emolien's eyelids twitched as a bad premonition flashed across his heart. Sure enough, the dozen or so women were walking towards him. They lined up in a row and bowed to Prince Mo. They said in unison, Your concubines greet your highness the crown prince. Yang Shirong was so angry that her face turned green. She slapped the table so hard that a corner of the table fell to the ground. Who are these people? The stinking brat. My impression of him had changed a little, but I didn't expect him to be this kind of person. Yang Shirong's face was saying, You're not satisfied with my chow, and you're making so many women? Her expression. If that gaze could be turned into a solid blade, it would probably be able to stab Prince Mo twice. Emolien's face darkened as he suppressed his anger. He glanced at the women. Who are you? We are here on the orders of the Crown Prince of Jianping to bring your highness the Crown Prince to the residence for a gathering. Emolien, Crown Prince of Jianping, do you want to die? Arbor, Crown Prince of Jianping, you're really tired of living. Yang Shirong slammed the table and pulled Arbor away. Jojo, why are you still staying here? Haven't you bullied us enough? Second Uncle Master. Emolien hurriedly stood up and pulled his chow to his side. I don't know these people. Just tell them to scram. Arbor glanced at the dozen women with heavy makeup. You're the Crown Prince of Jianping's Crown Prince's dancers? The women shook their heads. Yang Shirong's expression softened a little. Who the hell knew who the Crown Prince of Jianping was? But since they weren't the Crown Prince of Jianping's dancers, they might just be ordinary maids who were dressed a little flirtatiously. Unexpectedly, the leader of the dancers looked shyly at Emolien. We're the Crown Prince's people. The Crown Prince? Arbor. Where did this bunch of idiots come from? How dare they pretend to be the Crown Prince's people? The Crown Prince has already given us to your highness. I hope your highness won't despise us for being clumsy. Yang Shirong flipped over the table in front of her at once and pulled Xiao Mu away without another word. The Crown Prince hurriedly stood up with a dumbfounded expression and chased after the two of them. Yang Shirong pulled Arbor and ran at lightning speed. In a flash, they were already far away from the inn. Arbor couldn't help but sigh. He tugged at Yang Shirong's hand and said, "Second Martial Aunt." Yang Shirong turned to look at her and said seriously, "Child, have you thought it through? When you go to the Divine Land, if you go there as the Crown Princess, there will be many troubles and dangers." Arbor nodded. "I know, Second Martial Uncle." Yang Shirong looked at her again and said unhappily, "Child, with your qualifications, you can easily find 8 or 10 emolien, let alone one. Look at this kid, he's not that good." Yang Shirong continued to ridicule. He's surrounded by a flock of women. Who knows when someone will shove someone to his side? It's fine. The house is big and we need many servants, Arbor said mildly. Second Martial Aunt's eyes widened. You? Had he already thought of a way out for the dozen or so kabuki girls? Sweeping, mopping, tidying the courtyard. There will be many officials in the Crown Prince's residence in the future. There will be places for these people to work. That's right. Chapter 2201. Prince Mo, who had hurried over, heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He was afraid that Jojo would misunderstand him. Unexpectedly, the little guy trusted him so much. This made him very happy from the bottom of his heart. Have those people been arranged? Arbor glanced sideways at Prince Mo and asked with a snort. Yes. I've asked the butler to assign them. Let them do some cleaning work in the future. That shouldn't be a problem, right? Arbor was very satisfied. On the other hand, Yang Shirong's tense face finally relaxed a little. You really sent them to do the cleaning? Emolien nodded and looked at Yang Shirong seriously. Second Uncle Master, don't worry. They're only fit to do the cleaning work. I'm afraid they won't be able to do the more delicate work. Yang Shirong was speechless. Sure enough, this Emolien was a guy who dug endless pits. But then again, her family's Jojo seemed to have said before that he would send those dancers to do the cleaning work. The two of them did not speak at all. But in the end, they used the same method to deal with those dancers. It was obvious that the two of them were at the same level of swindling. Yang Shirong didn't know if she should feel comforted or pity for those dancers. Second Uncle Master, don't worry. Arbor said softly to Yang Shirong. Lien has never done anything to hurt me in all these days. Yang Shirong looked at Emolien and her expression softened a little. Emolien hurriedly struck while the iron was hot and continued. Second Uncle Master, don't worry. I won't do anything that will harm Jojo. Yang Shirong looked at him from head to toe and snorted. Your status is there for all to see. When we return to China, Jojo said that there won't be any trouble, but I don't believe him. There will be trouble, Emolien said with a very good attitude, but I'll solve it for Jojo. As long as I'm here, Jojo won't have to face any trouble alone. Yang Shirong nodded her head in acknowledgement of him. Speaking of which, the Crown Prince was really evil. Yang Shirong thought to herself. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes and witnessed the way he handled things, she really wouldn't have known that under this kid's gentle appearance. There was actually a thick black heart. Arbor reached out and grabbed Prince Mo's hand. The Crown Prince of Giantpain has repeatedly urged you to come. Do you still want to go? Go, why wouldn't I? Emolien's lips curled into a cold smile. Emokuin, that brat, had nearly caused his second martial uncle's impression of him to drop below the freezing point. Damn it, second martial uncle already didn't like him enough. Now it was almost worse. This made Prince Mo extremely unhappy. Prince Mo, who originally didn't plan to attend this banquet, suddenly decided to go if he didn't go. How could he kill Emokuin openly? Arbor looked at his expression and looked up to ask, You've decided to go? Emolien nodded and reached out to hold her delicate wrist. Let's go together. Miss Chow pursed her lips. They didn't invite me. That invitation clearly stated that it was for Mo Lien to go alone. Mo Lien raised his hand with a smile and planted a kiss on the back of her hand. MHM, come with me. You're my wife. If you don't go, I won't go either. Inviting me is inviting you, Mo Lien said softly. We're one. Chapter 2202. Arbor cast a glance at him. You don't mind that I'm in your way? Mo Lien was taken aback, but then he smiled and hugged her tightly, gently lifting her up so that she was at eye level with him. My Jojo, you're jealous. Pooh. Arbor suddenly thought of something. When he turned around and saw Second Uncle Master's feminine face, he immediately exclaimed, Second Uncle Master is beside us. This stinking brat's nonchalant manner was too detestable. Yang Shirong snorted and waved her hand. I can't be bothered with you guys. Make preparations earlier if you're going to China. Don't leave out a single thing that you should prepare. Going to China isn't the same as staying at home. Don't procrastinate and do things that make me uneasy. Procrastinate? Uneasy? Was Second Uncle Master talking about things like kissing and hugging? Mo Lien and the little fellow's beady black eyes met, and he couldn't resist chuckling. He hugged her and gave her a kiss. My Jojo, don't worry. Even if your Uncle Master wants to break up an affectionate couple, it won't work. If she doesn't let me see you, I'll definitely come see you even if I have to climb through the window and dig a tunnel. Thanks. Arbor rolled his eyes at him. That adorable expression tickled Mo Lien. Let's go. I'll dress you up when we return to the room. We'll go meet that fool in a bit. The vassal prince of Giantpain had been pacing back and forth in the study since early in the morning. At this time, there were two other people sitting in his study. The two of them looked like a pair of twins. They were about 40 years old, and their appearances carried a hint of sharpness and harshness. Vassal prince, there's no need to be so anxious. One of them couldn't resist shaking his head and saying, You don't know, but that guy is especially formidable. Mo Kuan couldn't help but shudder in fear when he recalled the scene that day. The people around Mo Lien didn't look like ordinary people. The moment they made a move, it was obvious that a few minor mystic cultivators absolutely couldn't deal with them. Chi, the twin on the left, couldn't help but sneer. That crown prince has been growing up on Sikong planet in the lower realm for several decades. Even if that group of people from the Council of Elders went over to impart their experience, you should also know that in a lower realm place like Sikong planet, the spiritual energy is very thin, and even mystic energy is rarely seen. I've also heard that spirit masters are extremely precious in the lower realms. Another man smiled and said, Even if that person started cultivating in his mother's womb, he might not be able to break through to the spirit realm, right? When Mo Kuan heard this, he didn't show much joy. Instead, he said very nervously, Then you don't understand the Crown Prince at all. The Crown Prince is definitely not as simple as you think. Your Highness, Your Highness. A man who looked like a manservant quickly walked in and bowed in greeting. Mo Kuan's face lit up. Did His Highness the Crown Prince accept the beauties I gave him? The manservant looked at Mo Kuan awkwardly, nodded and then shook his head. What do you mean by nodding and shaking your head? Your Highness, then. The Crown Prince did accept the beauties you gave him. Mo Kuan slapped his thigh and said joyfully, Then isn't that great? Why are you still shaking your head? Punk? I knew it. This Mo Lien was merely putting on an act. Didn't he still accept my beauties? The manservant said with a sullen face. This lowly one heard that the beauties we sent over were all sent to be cleaning maids by Prince Mo's men. You still think that you used the honey trap correctly. Chapter 2203. Mo Kuan widened his eyes in shock. Are you telling the truth? Mo Lien. That brat really sent all the beauties he sent over to sweep the streets. He actually dared to do such a thing. Mo Kuan was so angry that his gums hurt. His eyes were dark and gloomy as he stared at the page boy like a venomous snake. The page boy hurriedly crawled on the ground and kowtowed. This is the news I heard. I still have to ask around for the details. Then why aren't you going? Mo Kuan roared. Go take a look. Where did he send them to sweep the streets? These were all beauties that were 1 in 1,000. How could he bear to send them away? Emokuin's heart ached terribly. If he had known that the page boy was so unappreciative, he wouldn't have sent them over. Now, he didn't even know if he could get them back. The page boy was so frightened that he rolled and crawled out of the door. By the time he crawled out of the door, he was already drenched in cold sweat. Recalling Lord Vassal Prince's instructions, he hurriedly ran to ask around. One of the twins, who were in their 40s, sneered. This person really knows how to waste God's gifts. Lord Vassal Prince, why must we rush over to make our presence known in front of him? Let's not talk about whether this person can return to the divine continent. Even if he can, there's still eldest young master and second young master. The twin laughed sinisterly. Can't we just follow behind and watch the show? Emokuin rolled his eyes. His voice was somewhat indignant. Previously, I was so frightened by him that I lost my composure. Now that I've regained my senses, I won't show such cowardice. Humph. He's just a crown prince who hasn't been acknowledged yet. Lord Vassal Prince sneered. When he returns to the divine continent, he'll get it. Then why did Lord Vassal Prince invite him to a banquet this time? Emokuin gritted his teeth. Originally, I wanted to connect with him, but now, I think that he's an unappreciative person. Isn't that so? The middle-aged man chuckled. Our old vassal prince is someone who has the right to speak in front of the emperor. TSK, someone like him dares to look down on you. Emokuin raised his hand and stopped the middle-aged man from continuing to flatter him. He asked with a solemn face, "Where's Abiao? Where the hell did he go?" My reply just now was completely brainless. Is the crown prince coming or not? Not long after, the manservant who had left hurriedly ran back and bowed in front of Emokuin. Emokuin waved his hand impatiently and asked, "How is it? Where did he throw those beauties to? And tonight's banquet, is he coming or not?" If this fellow really didn't give Emokuin any face, then humph. When he returned, he would immediately report to his father and ask his father, the king of Giantpain, to come forward and complain about this fellow to the great emperor. When the manservant Abiao heard this, he hurriedly knelt down with a plop and said in a trembling voice, "Reporting to Lord Heir, His Highness the Crown Prince, he. What about him? Tell me." His Highness the Crown Prince ordered a steward to keep those beauties in the guest house where they're staying, to wipe the floor, wipe the stools, and pour the night incense. Smack! Emokuin, who was burning with rage, smashed the cup in his hand. Say that again. The manservant. Woo-woo. This wasn't something that this lowly one arranged. Chapter 2204. If you keep getting angry at this lowly one, will that accomplish anything? Wouldn't that be of no avail? The page boy criticized him incessantly in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. He could only smile obsequiously and say, "The beauties have all been left at the inn." Emokuin immediately jumped up from his seat and smashed basically everything that could be smashed in the living room. He then exclaimed in exasperation, "This punk actually doesn't give me any face. The beauties that he sent over. Never mind that he didn't accept them, but he still brought them back. Not only did he not freaking return them, but he even arranged for them to go to the inn to pour night incense and whatnot. Only this Mo fellow could do such a thing. Oh wait, that's not right. This Mo Lien fellow could do such a thing." Emokuin was burning with rage. He paced back and forth in the living room, stepping on the porcelain shards beneath his feet. Crunching sounds could be heard as he stepped on them. Lord Vassal Prince. Scram. Yes, this lowly one will scram right away. As if he had been pardoned, Abiao frantically ran out without a care in the world. Come back. Emokuin roared angrily. Abiao turned around as if he had lost a parent and bowed to Emokuin, asking, "Lord Vassal Prince, do you have any other instructions? This Mo fellow doesn't give this young master any face at all. Go and bring everyone back from the inn." He wasn't freaking sending them off anymore. Was this how these beautiful young ladies tormented him? He, Emokuin, had painfully parted with them to let that punk enjoy them. But in the end, smack, 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 he was slapped in the face. Emokuin paced back and forth in the living room with his hands behind his back. With a long face, Abiao timidly asked Emokuin, "Lord Vassal Prince, are you sure you want to do this? If the people who were sent out were to bring them back, if this matter were to spread to the divine province, it was guaranteed to become the biggest joke in the upper-class circle." As a subordinate, he was completely thinking of Lord Vassal Prince's face. If he did this and Lord Vassal Prince was mocked in the end, the first unlucky one would definitely be him. Lord Vassal Prince definitely wouldn't say that he made the wrong decision back then. Then the one at fault would definitely be him, Abiao. Go! Yes, yes, yes. Abiao bitterly turned around and was about to leave. The immortal-like couple walking towards him scared him so much that his legs went soft, and he knelt down on the spot. "Your Highness the Crown Prince." The Crown Prince cast a sidelong glance at him. "Haven't you seen my Crown Princess?" "Greetings, Crown Princess. May the Crown Princess have good fortune and peace." Abiao immediately lowered his head. He had a strong desire to live and lay down. Wasn't the Crown Prince's aura a little too strong? Prince Mo grunted. Holding Arbor's little hand, he stepped on the broken porcelain pieces on the ground and walked in front of Emokuin with a faint smile. "What's wrong? A floor full of fragments to welcome me?" Emokuin shrunk his neck inexplicably and slowly moved closer to the twin bodyguards. "Greetings, cousin-in-law." Emolien looked at him coldly. Emokuin was speechless. How strange. Suddenly, he felt as if the entire hall was covered in ice. The air was so cold. So cold. Emokuin took another step back and smiled inexplicably. "Cousin-in-law, you're here so early. This younger brother didn't come out to greet you." Emolien glanced at him. There wasn't a hint of a smile in her eyes. "When I walked to the door just now, I heard you say something about returning something to you." Chapter 2205. You tell him. Emolien glanced at the page boy, Abiao, who was kneeling on the ground. "What do you want to return to your lord heir?" Abiao's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. Hey, my uncles, hey. I'm just a page boy. Why did this fire inexplicably come to me?" Abiao didn't dare to answer casually. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, "Replying, Your Highness, the Lord Heir didn't say anything." "Emokuin, why don't you tell him?" Emolien turned around and looked coldly at this younger cousin of hers. It was said that the king of Giantpain was his father's favorite youngest brother. In the imperial capital, the king of Giantpain's status was second only to his father. Therefore, these sons of his were considered to be very precious and favored by the heavens. The king of Giantpain's heir was ranked third and was the legitimate son of the king of Giantpain's family. He even had 2 concubine-born brothers above him and seemed to be quite capable. This was the information that Emolien had received for the time being. In the end, Emolien didn't need to care about these people at all. His status was there. As long as he returned to the divine continent, all the princes and princesses would have to give way to him. The king of Giantpain's heir only wanted to go home and find his father. He took a step back in fear and instantly regretted his careless words just now. It was just a few beauties. If he gave them to his cousin, the crown prince, he could do whatever he wanted with them. For the sake of these beauties, he had to go against the crown prince. This was not a wise move. Emokuin didn't know that in Arbor's eyes, his current appearance was instant cowardice. The crown prince actually had such a cowardly brother. Arbor immediately glanced at her husband with disdain and rubbed her little hand hard against his palm, wanting to pull it out. The crown prince. Every time he saw his younger cousin, he freaking felt vexed. Jojo didn't seem to like his cowardly cousin. Not only that, he seemed to despise him every time because his cousin was too cowardly. Prince Mo, who felt very wronged, became angrier the more he looked at his cousin. The king of Giantpain was a hero of his generation. How did he raise such a coward? Your Highness the Crown Prince. One of the twins suddenly spoke and cupped his hands towards Prince Mo. Prince Mo glanced at him coldly. his gaze landing on him. Who are you? I am Lao Hai, the personal bodyguard of the Crown Prince of Jianping Palace. This is my younger brother, Lao Jiang. The middle-aged man called Lao Hai said faintly, I have a few words, but I don't know if I should say them. What status do you have to speak to me? Prince Mo's eyes flashed with a cold light. It was so dark that people couldn't help but feel frightened. Lao Hai's face darkened slightly as he suddenly took a step forward. Xiao Mu only felt a gust of air slanting toward her. He is indeed a bold person. Mo Lien raised his hand and pulled her into his embrace. With a flick of his sleeve, he completely waved away the spiritual energy that Lao Hai released. At the same time, a cold light flashed in his eyes and a fire arrow shot out from his sleeve. With lightning speed, it shot towards Lao Hai's face. Lao Hai was shocked. He didn't expect the Crown Prince's speed to be so fast. It was already too late for him to dodge. As he rolled on the ground, his left arm was already pierced through by the fire arrow. That speed was so fast that it was almost impossible to see with the naked eye. Lao Hai wanted to react, but it was already too late. He opened his mouth and cried out. Chapter 2206. Bang! Lao Hai was instantly sent flying, tumbling to the ground. With a pu sound, he spat out a large amount of blood. Eldest brother. Lao Jiang was shocked. He quickly went forward to help him up, but unexpectedly, he heard Lao Hai's cry of alarm. Second brother, be careful. Eldest brother. The two brothers were simultaneously sent flying by the two palm force winds. Following the force, they rolled out without any ability to resist. One heavily crashed into the cabinet at the side, while the other was fiercely flung against the wall. The one who crashed into the cabinet had the cabinet fall down, smashing into his lower back. The one on the wall was even more miserable. His entire head went through the wall, and he was stuck on the wall, unable to get down for the time being. With the Crown Prince's attack, the entire hall fell silent. The Crown Prince of the King of Jianping staggered back a dozen steps, hiding behind the armchair. He looked at the Crown Prince with a somewhat frightened expression, and said with a trembling voice, Cousin, let's talk things out, talk things out. He was just saying that Mo Lien, this punk, had astonishing combat prowess. This Lao Hai and Lao Jiang didn't even know Crown Prince Mo's background. Yet they dared to rush up and spout nonsense. They really weren't too smart. Looking at the two bodyguards beside him who could be considered presentable, then thinking about the two attendants beside his eldest brother and second brother, Mo Kuan couldn't help but feel a little stifled. Although he was the legitimate son of the King of Jianping and had successfully inherited the title of Crown Prince according to the ancestral rules passed down by the old ancestors, his father still loved his eldest brother, who was proficient in both the pen and the sword, the most. Even the attendant beside his eldest brother was an expert whose cultivation was close to the god realm. As for the two people beside him, Lao Hai and Lao Jiang were only 10th level great spiritual masters. In the middle 6 prefectures and the lower star domain, they were definitely presentable. However, in places like the upper 3 prefectures, it was hard to explain. Wait a minute. Mo Kuan seemed to have thought of something. He frowned and racked his brains for a while. Suddenly, his expression changed as he looked at Prince Mo. This cousin of his took care of 2 10th level great spiritual masters within a few breaths of time with a wave of his hand? Then his realm. What was it? Mo Kuan couldn't help but feel a little scared. He hugged the armchair and took a few steps back. Don't come over, he shouted at Mo Lien. Cousin. We're from the same sect, we share the same surname. You can't be so ruthless to me. My father, he is your uncle. Mo Kuan. Ah, yes. Mo Kuan hurriedly nodded in response. However, he hugged the armchair and took a few steps back. When Arbor saw his cowardly appearance, he looked down on the Mo family even more. She anxiously tried to pull her little hand out of Mo Lien's palm, but to no avail. Mo Lien! Exclamation point! Because of this crazy Mo Kuan. Not only was he misunderstood by second martial uncle, he even caused Jojo to look down on the Mo family. Cousin, I'm telling you, if there's anything between us, Let's talk about it calmly. Then, those beauties that I gave you, you can do whatever you want with them. It's fine. You can leave them in the inn to sweep the floor or pour the night incense. I won't care. What can you do? Arbor snorted rudely. He raised his little hand and shouted, "What are you still standing there for? Send a gift in return." Emokuin's eyes immediately widened. His nerves were strangely tense. What? There was a gift in return. Chapter 2207. Emokuin. What's with this ominous feeling? As soon as Xiao Mu mentioned returning a gift or something, his nerves immediately tensed up. No need. Emokuin hurriedly said. Little cousin-in-law, actually, you don't have to return the gift. Arbor coldly swept a glance at him. Bring it over. What are you doing? Stop it. Emokuin widened his eyes and instinctively retreated a few steps while hugging his armchair. He stared warily at Arbor and hurriedly signaled the two guards with his eyes. Unfortunately, Lao Jiang had just helped his older brother, who had vomited blood, up from the ground. The two of them looked pale as they supported each other. They were afraid of being beaten up by Prince Emo and didn't dare to step forward for the time being. A string of familiar groans traveled in from outside the door. Emokuin hugged his armchair and hid behind the table. When his gaze landed on the door, his eyes immediately widened. He saw a group of burly men carrying 10 fat sows walk in from outside the door. They squealed as they squeezed through the door. Fortunately, the hall of Emokuin's temporary residence was big enough. With over 20 people carrying 10 sows, it didn't feel crowded at all. The stewards and servants of the heir who heard the news were all stunned. They all looked at the legendary little crown princess as if they were looking at a murderous shark. The pitiful heir hugged his armchair and exclaimed, "Cousin-in-law, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? Ah! This fellow actually carried so many pigs over as a return gift?" Emokuin had the urge to cry. Could it be that this scary little cousin-in-law wanted him to eat all 10 of these pigs in one day? Arbor pinched his chubby hands and looked expressionlessly at the wailing Emokuin. "What are you all standing there for? Do it." The guards who followed the little crown princess silently swallowed their saliva and hurriedly went forward to twist Emokuin's arms, who couldn't stop struggling. With both of Emokuin's arms held down, the armchair he was hugging naturally fell to the ground. He was on the verge of tears that she looked at Prince Emo with fear and trepidation, her eyes almost overflowing with tears. Cousin? You? Aren't you going to control your wife? What was she trying to do? Cousin, I am telling you, don't mess around. I can't eat so much pork. Me. Nonsense. Arbor scolded. Take him away. Emolien rubbed her forehead speechlessly and silently turned her face to the side. To be honest, he had no idea Jojo was up to something like this. It was no wonder that the little fellow had solemnly asked him to wait for a while when he left the house, saying that she wanted to prepare a return gift for Emokuin. He thought it was a gift in return. His wife had actually prepared 10 sows for Emokuin. This was really, only someone with her brain could think of such a thing. Jojo? Emolien called out to his little wife in a small voice. Arbor glanced at him and expressionlessly turned her little face away. Let's go. The guards escorted Emokuin all the way to the dining area in the rear garden. The steward of the heir apparent followed behind with a long face. After chasing after the group for a while, he called out breathlessly, "Crown Princess, what are you trying to do?" Arbor saw an empty cow, sheep, and horse pen from afar. She waved her hand and said coldly, "Put them all in." Chapter 2208. The 20 or so strong men hurriedly walked forward, looked at each other, and hurriedly put the 10 sows in. Where is he? The corners of the guards' mouths twitched as they hurriedly escorted the wailing and struggling Emokuin forward. They lowered their heads and bowed. Crown Princess. The little crown princess was expressionless as she said with a cold face, "Why aren't you inviting Prince Jianpain in?" Yes. One of the guards' mouths twitched as he forcefully held back his laughter. He said in an extremely calm voice, Prince Jianping, please? What are you doing? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? Ah! Prince Jianping let out extremely tragic cries. Prince Jianping struggled with his two arms and hugged whatever he saw as he was dragged over while hugging the fence. Emolien. Arbor's small face was cold as he watched Prince Jianping cling to the fence at the door with all his might. The guards were unable to escort him in. The little guy took a few steps forward and kicked him in the butt. Emolien. Bam! Prince Jianping was so pitiful that he rolled forward and was forced to fall into the pigsty, biting into a piece of mud on the ground. His front teeth almost fell out, and 2 streams of tears suddenly flowed down. Close the door. At Xiao Mu's command, several royal guards swiftly locked up the fence door. Everyone. You can't do this. The steward pounced forward and lay down at Emolien's feet. That page boy Abiao was also scared to death. He scrambled over with a pale face and kowtowed repeatedly to Emolien. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Prince, please spare my life. Emolien. This prince didn't do anything. What's with this? This prince is utterly devoid of conscience expression. Arbor leaped up and stood on the fence door, coldly looking at Prince Jianping, who was rolling around in the pigsty. With a wave of her hand, a faint fragrance of powder drifted into the pigsty. Arbor watched expressionlessly as the 10 sows suddenly became restless and madly chased after the crown prince of Jianping. He turned his back in disgust and jumped down from the fence. Guards, fetch some buckets of water. Reporting to Your Highness, reporting to the crown princess, those cough, the guests attending the banquet are here. Oh! Emolien turned her head to look at the servant who reported, Who are they? Cough, Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Six Sons Sect, Heavenly Fortune Sect, and other major sects, sect masters, elite disciples, and so on. Bring them over, Emolien said indifferently. Bring it here? No, Your Highness the Crown Prince. The steward wailed on the ground. Why not? The masters are all here. Aren't you here for a banquet? Isn't a banquet supposed to have some entertainment? Crown Prince Mo waved his hand impatiently. What Lu Su, have them all come over. Steward! Exclamation point. Was it the trend to let the masters act as performers for this extra entertainment at banquets nowadays? Yes. The servant accepted the order with an embarrassed expression. The others didn't even dare to utter a word. They all silently lowered their heads and stood solemnly at the 2 sides, hating that they had 2 ears to hear so much. At this moment, everyone hated that they couldn't just be a block of wood. This His Highness the Crown Prince could even discipline the Crown Prince of Jianping without any explanation, let alone these small fries. Who dared to be the bird that stuck its head out and provoke this fiendish couple? Chapter 2209. Ha ha ha. The sect master of the Six Sons sect, Qingguang, walked over with a few Six Sons sect disciples. When he saw Prince Mo from afar, he hurriedly went forward to greet him. Your Highness, it's an honor to meet you. Prince Mo nodded at him indifferently. Sect Master Qingguang's bald head was extremely dazzling under the setting sun. The middle-aged man who was a few steps away from him had an ordinary appearance, but his voice was loud and clear. I'm Wu Nyozi from the Heavenly Fortune sect. Greetings, Your Highness. Wu Jin followed behind his father with a complicated expression. He looked at Emolien and Arbor with a strange expression. These 2 people had left a deep impression on him in Liangyuan Medicine Store. Those people from Hongyuan Island had suffered greatly in the hands of this couple. He would never forget Madame Zhang's strange expression before she died. So these 2 people were the Crown Prince and Crown Princess from the Divine Land? It was no wonder that people with such prominent identities were so ruthless and weren't afraid of causing trouble at all. Wu Jin also abruptly turned his head. Sure enough, he saw Zhang Wuxiang, who was standing half a step behind him, glaring furiously at Xiao Mu. Wu Jin was about to remind young Mistress Zhang when he saw the scene in the pigsty. His eyes widened, and the hair on his head almost exploded. Oh, Master Tian, the one who was locked in the pigsty and running around in circles. Wasn't that the unlucky prince of Giant Pain himself? Everyone's eyes couldn't help but twitch. The crown prince of the Giant Pain Wong family was so unlucky? At this moment, he was running back and forth in the inner circle like a madman, gasping for breath. The scariest thing was that there were 10 running pigs behind him. Everyone looked at each other in silence with a strange expression. They were all stunned. What was going on with the crown prince of Giant Pain? Mo Kuan ran until he was half dead. He only felt that the herd of pigs running behind him was very scary. He felt that if he dared to stop, he would probably be torn apart by the pigs in the next second. Your Highness, Your Highness. Qin Guang hastily walked forward and called out loudly. He looked on helplessly as the crown prince of Giant Pain ran past in front of him. The head of the Heavenly Fortune sect, Wu Nyozi, hurriedly turned around and hurriedly bowed towards Mo Lien. Your Highness, I don't know if there's some misunderstanding between the heir and myself. What are you doing? Prince Mo glanced at him indifferently. What do you know? The crown princess is giving you a gift in return. Mo Lien swept a glance at Wu Nyozi, who was making a fuss over nothing and hadn't seen the world. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Ah! The crown prince of Giant Pain was scared out of his wits by the herd of pigs. He leaped up, wanting to leap up. Unexpectedly, his body was just suspended in midair when he was struck down by a tyrannical air current. He almost slipped into the herd of pigs. He hastily used his 2 hands to cling onto the fence, hanging onto it. He shrieked, "No, don't. Let me out. Little cousin-in-law. Hurry and let me out. Cousin. Xiaomu walked up a few steps and icily said with a stoic face, "What? You don't like the gift I'm giving you in return? Who the hell would like this kind of gift?" Mo Kuan was ravaged to the point of tears and snot overflowing. His hands clung onto the fence tightly, refusing to let go. He didn't want to talk about his image anymore. Chapter 22:10. His entire body was hanging from the door, and his 2 legs couldn't help but curl upwards. At this moment, he could only feel the herd of pigs circling around his feet, as if he lowered his feet by half an inch, those pigs would gnaw on both his legs. It was too terrifying. Mo Kuan kept crying as he said, "Let me out, little cousin-in-law. What did I do wrong for you to treat me like this? Let me out." Arbor couldn't help but be enraged when he heard that. "You don't like my return gift?" Mo Kuan was just about to nod when he caught sight of Arbor's icy gaze. His heart trembled, and he hurriedly shook his head. I like it. Ah, no. It's me, little cousin-in-law." Wah. Mo Kuan was in tears. His legs that were hanging from the door kept kicking upwards, and he was so scared that he pissed his pants, his face drained of color. Arbor glanced at him coldly and asked leisurely, "Are you still going to give the crown prince a gift later?" "No, I won't. Mo Kuan had already pissed his pants. Don't freaking talk about giving a gift. He wouldn't give anything. Would he still dare to give a gift? Didn't he just give His Highness the crown prince a bunch of flirtatious beauties? In the end, the crown princess gave him a bunch of old sows as a return gift. This gift was really unique. It was completely different from anyone else's return gift. Arbor nodded when he heard that. He glanced at a guard beside him and took out a thin piece of paper from his inner world. "Sign it for him." That guard's mouth twitched, and he hurriedly took the pen and paper with both hands. He turned and walked quickly to Mo Kuan, who was still clinging to the door. He handed the pen and paper to Mo Kuan. Mo Kuan wasn't in the mood to read at this moment. He hurriedly reached out to sign it after receiving it, and he cried out tearfully, "Little cousin-in-law, crown princess, hurry and let me go, crown princess." He had agreed to everything, signed the paper, and even apologized repeatedly. What was this devilish crown princess waiting for? Why didn't they let him go? Arbor reached out and took the thing he signed. After looking at it, he nodded and raised his hand to shake the thin piece of paper in his hand. "Remember what you've signed." Xiao Mu stated coldly, "In the future, If there are still people who want to gift this and that to the Crown Prince, this Crown Prince Consort guarantees that the return gift I will give you will definitely satisfy all of you and satisfy all of you. Everyone! Exclamation point. Was the Crown Princess venting her anger on the Crown Prince of Giantpain? Arbor then turned around and stomped back to Emolien's side. Emolien smiled and reached out to hold her little hand. She turned around and led her out. Are you happy now, Jojo? If he did not let the little guy vent his anger, the one who would be in trouble would be him. Thank the heavens, thank the Crown Prince of Giantpain. This time, the little fellow should be able to calm down. As expected, the expression on Miss Chow's face eased a little, and she nodded reluctantly. Weakling, I don't even have the desire to teach him a lesson. The Crown Prince. Seeing the two of them walk out hand in hand, the steward and the others didn't dare to stop them. After the two of them walked a little further away, the steward hurriedly called a Biao to come forward and rescue his master from the gate with tears in his eyes. At this moment, the Crown Prince of Giantpain was already paralyzed on the ground. His legs were trembling non-stop, and he even wet his pants from fright. Classmate Dun Zong, who had been watching the show the entire time, was speechless. The little girl was indeed incomparably ferocious. Seeing how she scared the Crown Prince of Giantpain into a dog, as a bystander, he felt a little satisfied. I'm going to sleep, and everything will return to normal tomorrow. Chapter 22:11. Dunju pretended to show concern. How are you feeling? Crown Prince Giantpain. Cough. If you're not feeling well, don't force yourself. Quickly help the Crown Prince back to his room. Sect Master Qing Guang of Six Sons Sect turned back to look at the Crown Prince's back with a complicated expression. This Crown Prince actually did such a thing to his own cousin in front of so many family heads. He didn't give them any face at all. It was obvious that he wasn't someone who was easy to get along with. However, it made sense. The Crown Prince of the Divine Province was there. Crown Prince Giantpain must have had nothing better to do to go against him in the end. Not only did he almost lose his life, he also lost all his face in front of everyone. All the family heads stood there awkwardly. They didn't know if they should escape immediately or continue to be a part of the background. Dunju still went forward and reached out with a smile to help the embarrassed Crown Prince Giantpain up. Crown Prince Giantpain, are you all right? Do I look like I'm all right? Crown Prince Giantpain suddenly roared. He was in a crazy state now, and he didn't even care about Dunju and the others. He just wanted to shout out all the anger in his chest. The volume of his voice was so loud that it scared the surrounding family heads, and they all frowned and took a few steps back. Crown Prince Giantpain supported his manservant, Biao, and stood up shakily. He felt that his legs were still trembling uncontrollably. Mo Kuan shouted sternly, Emolien, Arbor, I won't let you off. This matter couldn't end like this. Emolien, that fellow, condoned his wife to treat him like this. He must report him to royal father. Damn Emolien, damn Arbor, this black-hearted couple. He definitely wouldn't let them off. Crown Prince Giantpain. Biao said with a mournful face. His Highness the Crown Prince isn't easy to deal with. Let's return to the Divine Province first. The Crown Prince of Giantpain retracted his hand and gave him a slap. He shrieked in exasperation, Shut up! Biao covered his face and took a few steps back in fear. The Crown Prince of Giantpain pointed at the sky and cursed, You will pay the price for this. Oh, what's the price? A cold voice came from outside the crowd. Mo Kuan simply didn't expect that Emolien and Xiao Mu, this black-hearted pair, would actually return and appear before them again at this time. Mo Kuan was so scared that he pissed his pants on the spot. He quickly pushed the butler and Biao in front of him as a shield. He shrunk behind the butler and Biao, only popping out half of his head as he screamed, You guys, what else do you want? I'm warning you, don't do anything stupid. Don't act recklessly. Mo Kuan raised his voice and let out a series of dying duck cries. Arbor walked up to Mo Kuan expressionlessly and hooked his little finger at him. What are you doing? Mo Kuan's nerves tensed up. He hugged the butler's waist tightly and refused to let go. The old housekeeper's face turned a little green. His waist was in pain from the crown prince's tight grip. Bring him here. At Xiao Mu's command, several royal guards immediately swarmed forward and pinned Imo-Kuan's hands behind his back without a care, escorting him to Xiao Mu. Imo-Kuan's eyes widened in horror. What did you do to me? Chapter 22:12. From the moment he entered the pigsty just now, he already realized that he could not muster any spiritual energy in his body, much less leap up. Even escaping seemed so difficult. Imo-Kuan was too scared. At that moment, he only felt that he was so insignificant in this world, so weak that he was comparable to a tiny ant. It was as if the other party only needed to stomp on him and flatten him. Little cousin-in-law, I was wrong. I know that I was wrong. Don't make things difficult for me, all right? I will definitely not send beautiful women to cousin-in-law in the future. Imo-Kuan's tears streamed down his face as he looked at Arbor with a frightened expression. Whoever sent beautiful women to the crown prince would be a big idiot. What kind of Hudong lioness did the crown prince marry? Look, he only sent over a dozen beautiful women, and she could not even tolerate it? Shut up! Arbor angrily slapped him heavily on the shoulder. That lad immediately fell to the ground with a plop like a soft-footed prawn. Arbor forcefully grabbed one of his arms and pulled with all her might. Imo-Kuan screamed like a pig being slaughtered. He only felt that his entire arm was being pinched in someone's palm and was being held behind his back. It was extremely painful. What are you screaming for? Arbor impatiently slapped the back of his neck forcefully. Shut up. Imo-Kuan's voice became softer, and he sobbed. He only wanted to go home and hug his father to cry properly. The crown prince's wife was too fierce. With this kind of personality, which man could stand it? Break, 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 break. Crown princess, break, 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 sob sob. Imo-Kuan only felt that his entire arm did not seem to belong to him anymore. The pain of being held behind his back kept surging in his heart. Arbor forcefully shook the arm that was holding Imo-Kuan. Gulp! A small box suddenly rolled out of Imo-Kuan's sleeve and landed on the ground. Arbor stretched out her leg and kicked the box, causing it to fly up and land in her hands. Ah, this is... Crown Princess, you can't snatch mine? Pa! Without another word, Arbor swept his sleeve across Imo-Kuan's face. Imo-Kuan's head fell to the ground with a thud. Arbor tossed the box in his hand and glanced at the person lying on the ground with disdain. You can find trouble with me at any time, but it's best to be prepared for a short life. The little fellow threw the box into his inner world, snorted, and walked to the crown prince's side without looking back. Imo-Lien helplessly reached out to hold her little hand. What's in that box? It turned out that the reason why the little fellow had dragged him back was because of this box in Imo-Kuan's sleeve. Chocho said this is a snow ginseng fruit seed. The little fellow cast a glance at Imo-Lien, who was lying on the ground, then looked up at Imo-Lien and said, I'll plant it for you to eat. Imo-Lien nodded. Is it delicious? Yes. Miss Chow nodded her small head. It's even more delicious than the winter fruit. If ordinary people eat it regularly, it can also prolong their life. When it's grandmother's birthday, we can go home and give it to her. Okay. Imo-Lien grinned and patted her little head. The young couple held hands and were really going to leave this time. Zhang Wuxiang, who was standing at the side, looked slightly agitated. Just as she was about to move, Wu Genie, who was paying close attention to her movements, reached out and pulled her back. Wu Genie also lowered his voice and asked Zhang Wuxiang, What are you doing? This slut killed my mother. Shouldn't I kill her for revenge? Chapter 22:13. Why don't you wait 2 more days until the people from Great Source Island arrive? Wu Genie frowned. You'll only be humiliating yourself if you rush up now. Zhang Wuxiang recalled Arbor and Imo-Lien's skills and couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. Although Wu Genie was a useless coward, he was still quite smart. What he said wasn't wrong. If she rushed out to settle the score with Arbor and his wife now, she definitely wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. Zhang Wuxiang stopped in her tracks indignantly. She glared hatefully at Arbor and his wife's backs as she reluctantly watched them leave. The crown prince of Giant Pain, who had been ravaged, once again lost all the strength in his body and collapsed on the ground. A Biao hurriedly crawled forward and reached out to help him up. Prince? Prince. Return to the Divine Prefecture. Return to the Divine Prefecture immediately. Prince of Giant Pain was so angry that his lips trembled and his entire body trembled. He wanted to return to the Divine Prefecture immediately to find his biological father. He didn't want to continue staying in this damned place any longer. He wanted to find his father. He wanted to return to the Divine Prefecture. A Biao nodded repeatedly. Yes, yes, yes. It's just that we have to wait 2 more days before we can leave through that special passage. Return immediately. Prince of Giant Pain screamed. The Heavenly Fortune sect master, Wu Nyozi, twitched his eyes and couldn't help but say, Prince is tired. You'd better help him back to his room to rest. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain's eyes suddenly widened as if he wanted to eat someone. His gaze circled Wu Nyozi, Qing Guang, and the others, and he shrieked, You, why are you all here? His disgraceful appearance just now and when he was forced to kneel on the ground by the Crown Princess, they saw all of it? Only then did Prince of Giant Pain come back to his senses and realize that the patriarchs and elite disciples of Shuntian Prefecture's aristocratic families were all gathered here. Qing Guang hurriedly cupped his hands and smiled apologetically. Prince, Qing Guang will take his leave first. Farewell, farewell. The patriarchs cupped their hands and bowed. Then, they hurriedly led their disciples out of the hall. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain's furious roar came from behind. Who is it? Who brought them all here? Who is it? Regardless of how hysterical the Crown Prince of Giant Pain was, Arbor and Emolien walked out of the residence hand in hand, heading towards the inn they were staying at. Let's go buy a house. Arbor suddenly said, I think we should stay here for a few more days. It's not convenient to do things in the inn. Emolien's eyes lit up. She grabbed Arbor's hand and pressed it against her chest. Jojo, do you want to spend some time alone with me? You think too much. Arbor looked up at him and suddenly remembered what Fan Meng and Fan Yu had said that day. He tilted his head and thought for a while. Then, he flipped his hand and took out a pot of blooming ink-colored lotus from his inner world. You can have it. I planted it myself, Arbor said expressionlessly. Emolien reached out and took the lotus from her. He hugged it in his arms and looked at it again and again. He held it lovingly. Jojo, you're giving it to me? Arbor nodded. I planted it myself. There's only one of its kind in the world. Do you like it? Emolien nodded vigorously. I like it, I like it. Of course I like it very much. Xiaomu beckoned at him with her small hand, indicating for him to bend down. Emolien blinked and leaned closer to her. What's wrong? Chapter 22:14. Miss Chow suddenly reached out her hands and circled them around his neck. She pulled him down and kissed him hard on the cheek. Emolien, I like you. All right, the confession was over. The gift had been given and the confession was over. Miss Chow felt that she had completed an important task and nodded at herself satisfactorily. She then released her hand and turned around to walk away in small steps, not caring about the dazed His Highness the Crown Prince. At this moment, the two of them had just exited Prince Giant Pain's residence. There were quite a lot of people on the bustling street. The little fellow's voice was quite loud. So at this moment, the passers-by on the street were all looking at the two of them with strange gazes. Miss Chow quickly squeezed into a small alley. She reached out a small fist and smashed it hard on her own head. Her brain was damaged. After the confession, she realized that she had actually made such an outlandish and bold action on a bustling street. It's over, it's over, it's over. It's all because this man was too alluring. She was so confused that she couldn't even think straight. Arbor reached out to cup her slightly hot little face and hesitated on the spot for a moment. Just as she was about to turn around and look for Emolien, she suddenly felt a strong gust of wind from behind her head. attacking the back of her neck with incomparable speed. Arbor's gaze turned cold. She quickly leaned to the side, her sleeves fluttering as she leaped onto the top of the wall with a whoosh. Her pair of cold eyes were suffused with a cold light as she stared coldly at the person below the wall. That person didn't manage to hit her in one strike and didn't say much to her. He directly took advantage of her and leaped up, aiming for her face. This speed. Arbor's heart slightly choked. She turned around and leaped, her long black hair gliding in a perfect arc in midair. After landing on the ground with a whoosh, Arbor rushed towards where Emolien was. However, two people quickly appeared in front of her and attacked her from the front and back, launching fierce attacks at her chest and back. The surging spiritual energy came straight at her. Just as the attack was about to land on her, Tong Jianjian's figure suddenly appeared beside Arbor. He crossed his arms to block the attack. Emolien, who had heard the news, immediately saw the strangers attacking Jojo. She narrowed her eyes and said angrily, "What are you doing?" When they saw him appear, they seemed to be slightly afraid and quickly exchanged glances with each other. Seeing that the group of people were about to retreat, Emolien rushed towards Jojo. He stretched out his arms but did not have time to catch his wife. Suddenly, he saw a large net being thrown down from the sky. Like catching a fish, it caught his chow in an instant. Without another word, it pulled her and quickly leaped up. A bird's cry came from the sky. Emolien's expression was furious. She raised her head and saw a huge strange bird dragging the net. It flapped its wings and flew up a few times before it completely disappeared. "Little Seven," Emolien shouted in exasperation. These people actually snatched away his wife right in front of his eyes? Emolien leaped onto the dragon's body. Taking Tong and the others, they quickly chased after the bird. After less than half an incense stick's time, the still air in the small alley once again rippled like water. The strange bird appeared in the air, and the net in its claws appeared. Qi Lianhai's expression was slightly gloomy as he appeared in the small alley again with his people. He beckoned with his hand, and that strange bird dragging the net fell from the sky and landed in front of them. Qi Lianhai gazed coldly at Xiao Mu, who was inside the net, and gave her a sinister smile. "It really wasn't easy to wait for you to be alone." Chapter 22:15. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. Emolien was so worried that she was confused, and she was tricked by the middle-aged man in front of her. In fact, Qi Lianhai had only used an invisibility talisman on them to temporarily hide everyone's presence. But with Emolien's intelligence, she would probably return in less than a minute. "So, all right, take her away immediately." Qi Lianhai was a cautious person. Although he had tricked the crown prince of the divine province into leaving, he knew that he wouldn't be able to fool him for long. Qi Lianhai's subordinates all pointed their weapons at Arbor in the net, warning her not to act rashly. Qi Lianhai sneered. "Don't worry, we don't want your life. We just want to ask the crown princess to come with us. Of course, you don't need to waste your energy trying to break this net." Qi Lianhai looked at her triumphantly. "This net can not only block your spiritual energy and presence, but you should have noticed by now that you can't even use your spiritual sense." Arbor looked at him coldly. "Take her away." At Qi Lianhai's order, the strange bird pulled up the net again and rushed into the sky. Qi Lianhai and the others quickly summoned their spiritual beast mounts and left with the strange bird. The group had only left for less than half a minute when Emolien's figure reappeared on the horizon. She returned to the alley where Arbor was taken away with Tong and the others. She stared gloomily at the empty alley and subconsciously clenched her fists. Was it Fang Su of the Greenwood Guard? Emolien asked angrily. "Go. Gather all the hidden guards in Shuntian Prefecture and dig Fang Su out." With that, Emolien leaped onto Yen Qi's back again and had him chase after Arbor's presence. "Lord Qi, we can't do it. She's too fast." A subordinate beside Qi Lianhai urgently reported. Qi Lianhai had also sensed Prince Mo's approach. He frowned and said, "I've already blocked her presence. How did she catch up so quickly?" "Who are you?" Arbor stood in the net, swaying left and right in the wind, but his face was still expressionless as he looked at Qi Lianhai. Qi Lianhai sneered, "Crown Princess doesn't need to know who I am. All you need to know is that from today onwards your good days are over." "Really?" Qi Lianhai smiled and opened a bottle of medicinal liquid in his hand. He quickly rushed to the red-beaked bird's side and fed it the entire bottle of medicinal liquid. The strange bird immediately let out a cry and flapped its wings even more vigorously. The speed seemed to have more than doubled as it flew forward. Arbor looked at them coldly and sized up Qi Lianhai. "I've never seen you before. You don't have to try to get information out of me." Qi Lianhai said with a smile, "I was only ordered to bring you back. As for what will happen in the future, you'll have to pray for yourself." Qiao Mu leisurely swallowed a pill and stared at Qi Lianhai with a cold glint in her eyes. "You think that victory is already in your grasp? What? Could it be that Crown Princess still has the strength to resist?" Qi Lianhai smiled proudly at her. "This sky cicada net of mine isn't some ordinary item. It's more than enough to trap a great spirit master, let alone a little spirit master like you." Arbor glanced at him. Chapter 22:16. A pair of claws were suddenly covered with a Vajra talisman. Like cutting vegetables and tofu, she stretched out her fingers and gently swiped at the net. Qi-la, the originally smug Qi Lianhai couldn't help but frown slightly. Qi-la. After another tearing sound, Arbor directly drilled out of the net. She flipped over and landed on the back of the strange bird. Then, she slammed her fist down on its big head. Her punch, which was imbued with the Vajra talisman, immediately caused the strange bird to shriek. Its body plummeted to the ground like a cannonball, with its head facing down and its legs facing up. When it was 1 foot from the ground, Arbor's figure suddenly spun in a parabolic arc in the air and rushed up again with a whoosh. However, the strange bird landed heavily on the ground with a howl. Its skull came into close contact with the ground and smashed its skull into pieces on the spot. There was no possibility of treatment at all. Qiao Mu hovered in the air and coldly gazed at that large bird that had already died. She then turned around and looked at the dumbfounded Qi Lianhai with a spurious smile. "Qi Lianhai!" Exclamation point. He didn't expect the Crown Princess to come out so easily. That heavenly cicada net was actually completely destroyed by this destructive woman in front of him. Qi Lianhai only felt like he was holding a breath in his heart. It was as if he couldn't spit it all out, and his entire chest felt uncomfortable. However, Arbor didn't wait for him to react and punched him hard in the stomach. Qi Lianhai couldn't resist this force. His whole body was beaten into the air, and his back hit several subordinates. Qi Lianhai's subordinates really exerted a Herculean effort to catch Qi Lianhai. Even so, they still carried Qi Lianhai's body and staggered back a few steps. After stabilizing his body with great difficulty, Qi Lianhai looked at Arbor angrily. He covered his painful stomach with one hand and shouted in a trembling voice, You! This damn little girl was trapped in the sky cicada net, and she actually had the strength to retaliate? He had really underestimated her. Arbor stretched out a small hand and waved a bronze plate in front of him. Qi Lianhai's expression changed, and he stretched out his hand to touch his waist. Sure enough, the copper plate that he had stuffed into his waist had actually disappeared at some unknown time. Arbor looked at the waist token over and over again, then raised his head to glance at Qi Lianhai. A cold smile faintly appeared on his lips. "So, it's Ani Prefecture's personal attendant. I didn't expect you all to be in such a good mood. Coming all the way from an E-Prefecture to Shuntian Prefecture to catch me?" Arbor swung his hand and threw Qi Lianhai's waist token back to him. "Here you go." In any case, she had no use for it. Only Qi Lianhai and his group took this small token seriously. Jojo. When Arbor heard the Crown Prince's voice from afar, his eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. He turned his head and looked toward the sky. In the clear blue sky, the Crown Prince was moving over like a bolt of lightning. In no more than a moment, he suddenly stopped beside Arbor and reached out to pull her into a tight embrace. His heart finally settled down. He reached out to hug her and sighed softly. Jojo. Arbor reflexively reached out to stroke his chest. It's fine. Chapter 22:17. Emolien was truly a bit too horrified. It had only been a blink of an eye, yet his wife was almost kidnapped on the streets? No one would be able to bear this matter. A second ago, Jojo was still happily confessing to him with flowers, but the next second, she was almost kidnapped. It was already fortunate that the crown prince didn't lose his cool on the spot when he saw the little fellow being dragged away by that strange bird. Fortunately, he reacted in time and rushed back, allowing him to catch up with this group of people. Emolien raised her hand to rub Arbor's head. At this moment, she could still feel her heart thumping wildly. Husband. These people were sent by Ani Prefecture. Arbor glowered at Qi Lianhai. Ani Prefecture's people had also interfered in the destruction of the Holy Water Sect. She hadn't even found the time to deal with them, but she didn't expect this group of people to deliver themselves to death first. Emolien flicked her sleeve and shot out a fire spirit, which heavily crashed into a man behind Qi Lianhai. Just now, it was that person who dragged the net and aimed a sharp blade at his Jojo's back. That man was caught off guard and was hit by the fire spirit. He flew several meters away and rolled twice when he landed with a bang. Qi Lianhai looked back and couldn't help but be secretly shocked by the crown prince's cultivation. The subordinates he brought were all spiritual cultivators level 7 and above, but they were like toys in the crown prince's hands. They didn't have the slightest ability to resist. You! Qi Lianhai's pupils contracted as he watched a stream of fire flash in front of him as fast as a gust of wind. Qi Lianhai shouted and activated his defensive barrier to block it. Unexpectedly, the crown prince's purple flame had an extremely strong impact. When it crashed into his chest, it was as if he had been struck by thousands of streaks of light, causing him to explode in pain. The defensive barrier simply couldn't withstand this flame and shattered on the spot. Qi Lianhai was also sent flying backward by this ferocious force. He crashed into the alley's wall behind him with a boom. How could that wall withstand this kind of force? It instantly shattered into pieces. Half of Qi Lianhai's body was buried in the ruins. He barely managed to prop himself up. His eyes were slightly frightened as he looked at the crown prince. This crown prince was actually able to insta-kill him, a grade 13 spirit master. Qi Lianhai hurriedly summoned his spirit beast, the spirit magpie, and struggled to jump onto the back of the spirit magpie. With a shout, he turned around and fled in panic. Roar! Unexpectedly, a dragon's roar came from the sky. Before Qi Lianhai could react, he felt an impact flying towards his face. How could he dodge in time? He was hit head-on in an instant. To be more precise, it was Little Seven's tail flick that sent it flying off the spirit magpie. As for the unlucky magpie, how could it dare to resist in front of the ancient golden dragon? It trembled for a long time before it was frightened by Shao Qi's roar. It folded its wings, closed its eyes, and fell to the ground with a thud, pretending to be dead. Little Seven circled around in the air. His body seemed to be covered in a layer of gold powder. Everywhere he went, there wasn't a lack of glittering gold folds. Qi Lianhai fell from the sky and landed headfirst on the ground with a pa sound. He landed headfirst on the broken mud wall of the small alley. His head was full of rubble and rubble. Xiao Mu calmly swept him a glance before tilting her small head and humping. Serves you right. You dared to catch Jojo and even said that Jojo wouldn't have a good life in the future. You're the one who won't have a good life. From now on, you'll be unlucky every minute. Chapter 22:18. Qi Lianhai struggled to crawl out of the mound and spat out a few mouthfuls of debris. His face contained traces of shame and anger as he stared at Emolien and Arbor. This was simply intolerable bullying. Qi Lianhai stumbled out of the ruins and glared hatefully at Emolien. You! Bang! Without waiting for him to finish, Emolien flicked her sleeve again and sent him flying, plunging headfirst into the mound of ruins. Qi Lianhai, who ate a big mouthful of dirt, was speechless. The heavens took pity on him. Why did he encounter this fiend? A warrior can be killed, but not humiliated. Qi Lianhai struggled to crawl out of the mound of ruins again and roared angrily, "Prince Mo, you!" Bang! Bang! Slap! Qi Lianhai, who had crawled out of the mound 7 or 8 times in a row, was thrown back in again by Prince Mo with a flick of his sleeve. After falling into the mound of dirt for the last time and eating a mouthful of debris, he no longer had the strength to struggle to get up. He simply lay in the mound of dirt and coughed a few times, choking his head, face, and mouth full of dirt. That taste was indescribably unpleasant. He had underestimated his opponent. Qi Lianhai clenched his fists tightly, unable to conceal the grief and shame in his heart. It was because he was overconfident that he faced this situation. However, at this moment, Qi Lianhai didn't even have the courage to crawl up again. He knew that at this moment, his courage had already been smashed away by Crown Prince Mo's successive strikes. The last bit of willpower he had left to struggle out had also been smashed away cleanly. He wanted to lie down like this until the end of time. Unfortunately, he didn't lie like this for long before his head was dragged out of the mound of ruins. Qi Lianhai felt like he was a chicken or duck waiting to be slaughtered, being dragged out and thrown heavily onto the ground. Tong Yi held his sword in one hand and stepped on his back. He squatted down and turned to ask the Crown Prince and Arbor, "Your Highness, should we take care of him immediately?" Mo Lien glanced at Qi Lianhai and shook her head. "Bring him here." Tong immediately dragged Qi Lianhai in front of the Crown Prince and unceremoniously threw Qi Lianhai on the ground like he was throwing trash. Mo Lien coldly glanced at Qi Lianhai. She suddenly reached out and sucked his head into her hand. Qi Lianhai's entire body trembled in fear. He already knew what this terrifying man in front of him wanted to do to him. Soul search. He wanted to search Qi Lianhai's soul? How could this be? "No, don't, Your Highness, please spare me. Your Highness, Does your master think that this prince is easy to bully?" Prince Mo slightly lowered his head and coldly looked at Qi Lianhai. "In your eyes, is this prince that easy to deal with?" No. Qi Lianhai was so terrified that he couldn't speak properly. His mind was so nervous that it was almost blank. How could he have the energy to think about what the Crown Prince was saying right now? He struggled strenuously in Prince Mo's hands and repeatedly shouted, "Your Highness, please calm your anger. Your Highness, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. This lowly one will definitely tell you everything I know and absolutely won't hide anything from you." Mo Lien coldly swept a glance over him. "Who are you to the Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's Hall of Care?" "This lowly one is the Prefecture Lord's personal attendant. I've already followed him for many years." "That means you know him very well?" Chapter 22:19. Yes. Mo Lien nodded at him with a smile that wasn't a smile, then glanced at Arbor, who was leaning against her. The latter nodded in understanding and took out a puppet charm. Without another word, he inserted it between Qi Lianhai's eyebrows. Originally, with Arbor's current cultivation level, the puppet charm he made was ineffective against Qi Lianhai. However, Qi Lianhai was now under Mo Lien's control, so it couldn't be easier to make him fall for the charm. Qi Lianhai only felt pain in his conscience before he seemed to lose consciousness. His consciousness was completely blurred. "What's your name?" Arbor asked coldly. "Qi Lianhai." "Kneel." Qi Lianhai obediently knelt down and pressed his head against the ground in front of the two people, lying there piously. The dozen or so An Prefecture disciples who were originally kneeling on the ground all shrank back in fright when they saw this. What was going on? Steward Qi actually knelt down so obediently? Tong led a group of people to surround them with swords raised. One of the men suddenly broke into a run and rushed toward an opening. This person's face was deathly pale with fright. While he was madly running for his life, Tong didn't even look at him. He directly raised his sword and pierced through his back, piercing through his heart. With a plop, that person fell to the ground. How could a 7th-rank spiritual master die so easily? Tong sneered and directly pierced through the back of that person's head with his sword. The person lying on the ground shuddered and screamed. This time, the sword pierced through his head, so he naturally couldn't be any more dead. One had to know that he originally wanted to play dead and look for a chance to escape. He didn't expect that playing dead would fail, and that he would really become a corpse. When the others saw Qi Lianhai's pious and obedient appearance, they were all bewildered. They were very clear that the crown princess and crown prince definitely had some strange methods. However, their thoughts of escaping all disappeared without a trace when they saw their companions die tragically. Qi Lianhai. Arbor coldly called out his name. His small, expressionless face was cold and indifferent. Do you know why I want you to go back? Qi Lianhai bowed his head and kowtowed to the ground. His face filled with a respectful expression. Arbor came to Qi Lianhai like a nimble cat and looked at him coldly. He leaned over and whispered, I want you to go back. Kill. Caretaker Hall. Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's residence. Guanisong was stopped by 2 guards. Her pretty face was filled with anger and anger. I want to see my father. I want to see my father. 6th young mistress, I'm really sorry. The manor head is currently with Madame Hua. The manor head has ordered that no one is to disturb them. Guan Yisong's pretty face was flushed purple, and her eyes were misty. If you let me in, I'll take responsibility for anything that happens. I want to see my father. I want. The 2 guards impatiently extended their arms to stop Guan Yibo. 6th miss, please behave yourself. You! Guan Yisong pointed at the 2 snobbish guards and shouted hysterically, Get out of the way! The 2 guards' faces darkened, and they blocked Guan Yisong with their crossed blades. 6th miss, please don't make things difficult for our subordinates. The manor head has ordered that no one is allowed to enter. My mother is about to die. I want my father to open the wonderful treasure tower and give me the blood coagulation pill to save my mother's life. One of the 2 guards couldn't help but snort. Aunt Jiang has always been weak and sickly. She uses pills above the profound grade to keep her life. Chapter 22:20. When has she ever been well? That's right, 6th miss is overly worried. It's fine. Perhaps you'll find that Aunt Jiang has already recovered when you return. This time is different from the past. Mother's symptoms are very serious. Medicine Master Gu said that the blood coagulation pill can save my mother. The blood coagulation pill. Ah! Her body was pushed by the 2 guards, and she almost couldn't stand steadily as she fell down a few steps. 6th miss, if you continue to mess around like this, the 2 of us will also be punished along with you. Isn't that right? 6th miss, please go back. If there's anything you need, come early tomorrow. Guan Yisong charged up the steps as if she had gone mad. 2 streams of fire spirit rushed towards the 2 guards' chests. However, she was only a small first-rank spirit master. In front of 2 third-rank spirit master guards, she was clearly not enough. One of the guards looked at her mockingly and sneered. He reached out his hand and blocked her fire spirit. The thin stream of fire spirit energy that Guan Yisong released burned for less than 3 seconds in the guard's hand before slowly extinguishing. The guard crooked his mouth and laughed mockingly. 6th miss, you don't have to waste your energy with this little bit of spiritual power. You know you can't break through, so what are you trying to do? We don't want to fight you. If we hurt you, we won't be able to explain it to the manor head. Heh! The other guard chuckled. 6th young miss, please. Father! 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 I beg you to see your daughter. Father! Father! Guan Yisong charged up the steps with all her might. She was pushed down several more steps by the 2 guards. After a few more times, the guards were completely impatient. They didn't control their strength. One of them gave her a hard shove and threw her onto the stairs with all his might. Guan Yisong rolled twice on the steps. She reached out to steady herself. When she stood up, she saw that the door to the manor head's residence was wide open. Her father, Guan Zhaotang, was wearing an unbuttoned inner garment. He walked out with a young and plump woman in his arms. He stood high up on the steps and looked down at her coldly. Guan Yibo, what are you doing? The Hall of Care shouted coldly. The plump woman in Guan Zhaotang's arms twisted her waist and climbed onto Guan Zhaotang's chest. She smiled as she looked at Guan Yiba, whose hair was messed up after she fell on the stairs. What sixth young mistress? She looked worse than a dog. The woman glanced at Guan Yisong mockingly before shaking her body again. Then, she snuggled into Guan Zhaotang's arms as if she had no bones. Father, please bestow the blood coagulation elixir fruit to save concubine mother. Guan Yisong crawled to her feet and knelt on the ground. She crawled toward the stairs on all fours. Father, nonsense. Guan Zhaotang glared at his youngest daughter coldly. Do you know what the blood coagulation pill fruit is? Guan Zhaotang looked at his daughter coldly and sneered from the bottom of his heart. That is a god-tier pill. Deity level. There was only one in the entire Guan family. That's a life-saving medicine. How could you use it on your useless mother? Go back. Don't talk nonsense in the future. Father. Guan Yisong knelt on the ground and crawled up a few more steps. Father, I can give up everything. I only ask that you bestow the blood coagulation elixir fruit to save concubine mother's life. Heh! Guan Zhaotang sneered at her. Chapter 22-21. Who do you think you are? Is it your talented elder sister? What can a mere first-rank spirit master do for the family? Go back to your room and don't come out and embarrass yourself. Father! Guan Yisong screamed at the top of her lungs. Aya, sixth young mistress. You really don't know how to behave. Madame Hua twisted her slender waist and pointed at Guan Yisong. Master has been troubled by many things recently. As a daughter, it's fine if you don't share the family's burden. But why do you keep bothering him with small matters? All right. Since you're still young, Master won't hold it against you. You should hurry back to your own court. Father. Guan Yisong climbed up a few steps, but was stopped by two guards again. Send sixth young mistress back. Guan Zhaotang flicked his sleeves and left with Madame Hua. He said coldly, no need to be polite. Throw her out. Sixth young mistress. Please. The two guards disrespected Guan Yisong even more after receiving the order. They pushed Guan Yisong down the stairs and looked down at her coldly. TCH, a useless concubine mother who's been sick for a long time still wants to use the blood coagulation pill? Dream on. Father, please save concubine mother's life. Father. Guan Yisong's eyes were filled with tears, and she could barely see the road clearly. Her gaze was fixed on Guan Zhaotang's departing figure, and her grief turned into deep hatred. Guan Zhaotang, you cruel and unscrupulous thing. If my mother hadn't led the entire Jiang family to support you and caused the Jiang family to fall apart, would you have the riches you have today? Guan Zhaotang, you're not human. Guan Zhaotang stopped in his tracks, turned his head abruptly and roared, Are you all dead? Shut her mouth and give her a good beating. It's the manor head. A few ferocious guards rushed out and dragged Guan Yisong away. They threw her down the stairs and began to beat her. Guan Yisong glared at her father, Guan Zhaotang, who was standing on the stairs. She laughed madly and said, Guan Zhaotang, you will get what you deserve. The entire Guan family will suffer retribution. You cruel and unscrupulous thing. You'll die a horrible death. Guan Yiba's mouth was gagged by a dirty rag. Then, a heavy stick landed on her body. After a few hits, she was covered in wounds and blood. Boer? A thin and weak servant girl walked over with a trembling woman who couldn't even walk properly. Boer. When the woman saw her daughter's situation, she let out a sorrowful cry. She struggled to let go of the young maid's hand. She didn't know where her divine strength came from, but she pounced over and hugged her daughter tightly. The few crazy guards didn't care and smashed their sticks straight at the mother and daughter. Oh! Guan Yiba shook her blood-soaked hair and flipped her body around. She tried her best to protect her mother and withstand the blows from the batons. Boer? Don't hit my Boer. The woman tried her best to protect her daughter, but her cultivation was too low. In the end, she was still protected by Guan Yisong. Guan only looked coldly at the mother and daughter before leaving with his arm around Madame Hua's waist. He didn't care about the mother and daughter's pitiful cries. Guan had many children, and many of them were talented geniuses. He didn't care about a mediocre woman like Guan Yisong. Chapter 22-22. 7 days later, at the beginning of January, in the depths of winter, the entire Enrich prefecture's capital was enveloped in a vast expanse of white cold air. On the bustling main street, an inconspicuous carriage with a black awning appeared. It followed the bustling main street and headed in the direction of the main mansion. When it passed the end of the main street, the curtain of the black awning carriage was gently lifted by a small white hand. Shui's gaze followed the endless stream of people and landed in front of a pharmacy. There were more than a dozen people watching the show there. They were pointing at a woman in thin clothes kneeling on the ground and whispering to each other. "What's going on?" This woman came before dawn. She wants to buy medicine on credit from Liangyuan medicine shop. It's a pity that the medicine shop isn't a charity hall. "Shopkeeper, please give me a blood coagulation pill fruit. I can work for the medicine shop to pay off my debt. I can be an ox or a horse for the rest of my life." The woman knelt on the ground and took a few steps forward, calling out to the people in the shop. There were scars on her head and arms, and her face was very pale. It was as if she had been beaten up, and her body was covered in wounds. The medicine shop opened a small door, and an old shopkeeper in his 50s walked out. He sighed at her and said, "Miss, please go back. Our medicine shop doesn't need help at the moment." "Shopkeeper, I beg you to show some mercy. My mother is waiting for the medicine to save her life. My mother." "Miss, please don't force me. The blood coagulation pill fruit you mentioned is a divine-level medicine. Not to mention that our medicine shop doesn't have it at all. Even if you search the entire Enrich prefecture's capital, even the pill shop might not be able to find it. Moreover, the blood coagulation pill fruit is priceless. If our Liangyuan medicine shop has this divine medicine, it will naturally be the treasure of the shop. How can we give it to you so easily? Mississippi, please go back. Shopkeeper, please save my mother." The woman kowtowed heavily on the ground and sobbed. "I beg you, shopkeeper, I beg you." In the shop, a young master wearing a pure white fox fur coat slowly walked out. As soon as this person appeared in front of people, they felt that their eyes were shining. They only felt that he was graceful and elegant, and his peerless talent was indescribable. "Young master." The young master raised his hand slightly to stop the shopkeeper from speaking. He glanced at the girl and said coldly, "There's nothing here that you want. You don't have to kneel here and waste your time." The shopkeeper couldn't bear to see her like this. He sighed and glanced at her. "Miss, my family's young master is right. Instead of continuing to waste time here, why don't you hurry back? Perhaps you can still see your mother again." The person kneeling in front of Liangyuan medicine shop was naturally Guan Yisong. At this moment, she raised her head. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at the handsome young man and then at the shopkeeper. Grief welled up in his heart, and he fell to the ground in a daze. Could it be that her mother was really going to leave her? From today onwards, she would be alone in this world, and she would have no more relatives. "Stop the car." The cold voice frightened the coachman. His arm trembled slightly, and he quickly pulled the reins to stop the horse. After a series of rustling sounds, a little girl wrapped in a fiery red cloak walked down from the carriage. She stood in the distance, and her gaze fell indifferently on Guan Yisong. At some point in time, small pieces of snow had begun to fall. The little girl stared deeply at the woman kneeling on the ground through the thin layer of snow. Chapter 22-23. Emolien got out of the car and reached out to hold her cold little hand. He asked softly, "Jojo, what's wrong?" Arbor's gaze fell on the girl for a long time. It was so long that her mind was almost blank. It was so long that she felt like she was about to become a beautiful snow sculpture. It was as if she was the only one left in the entire world. She stood there helplessly. Fine snow fell coldly on her body, face, hair, and neck. Ripples seemed to appear in front of her eyes, floating slowly. It made her see the past, the past, the past, the past. That small figure was also like this, kneeling in front of the pharmacy, begging the shopkeeper to give her a stock of spirit medicine, begging him to go home with her to see her mother who was on the verge of death after giving birth. Back then, she was so small, so pitiful, so insignificant. She was like a speck of dust between heaven and earth. She was so weak that it made people's hearts tremble. She was so fragile that it made people scared. With one touch, the bubbles in front of her would all shatter into dust and be blown away by the wind. "Are you cold?" Emolien realized that there was something wrong with her emotions. He suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. He held her little hands and rubbed them gently. He exhaled a breath of hot air. "Are you feeling stuffy?" Arbor's dark eyes moved slightly in their sockets. Her gaze fell on Emolien's face. She reached out and touched his face with her cold little hands. "Are you cold?" "Yes." He held her little hands tightly and blew on them. "No matter how cold it is, I can warm them up. Even if it's winter or frost and all things wither. As long as I'm here, Jojo will never be afraid of the cold." Arbor laughed from the bottom of her heart. She pursed her lips and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. "Poor. How am I poor?" Emolien reached out and hugged her. "Do you want to get in the car?" "All right," Arbor said with a flick of his finger. 2 dots of light flew out and landed in Guan Yibao's palm. The young master's gaze fell deeply on her departing figure, and his left hand involuntarily clenched slightly. Actually, he had already noticed her from the moment she got out of the car. He watched as her gaze landed on Guan Yiba. He watched as the two of them shook hands as if no one else was around. He watched as they hugged and whispered their feelings to each other. She did not notice his presence at all. He watched as she turned around and left after giving him the medicine. She didn't even spare him a glance. It was as if Ding Yun did not exist in this world at all. Several shouts rose and fell from the crowd. While everyone's gazes fell on the medicine bottle in Guan Yibao's hand, only young Master Ding's gaze remained focused on the girl's slender figure as she was helped into the carriage. Young lady, this is the blood coagulation pill fruit." The shopkeeper excitedly pointed at the small, dark red fruit in Guan Yibao's hand and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. This is a gift from an expert." The shopkeeper hurriedly looked around. At this moment, everyone's gazes followed the shopkeeper's gaze and landed on the inconspicuous carriage with a black awning around the corner. "Benefactor, please wait. Benefactor, please tell me your name. Yiba will repay you in the future." Guan Yiba excitedly chased a few steps forward. However, she only saw the corner of a red robe flash before her eyes. Chapter 22-24. The black canopied carriage quickly moved and sped away. The shopkeeper chased after them and stroked his beard as he looked at the blood coagulation pill in Guan Yibao's hand. He praised, "As expected of a divine medicine. Miss, quickly put it in my jade box. Don't let its medicinal properties dissipate." "Thank you, shopkeeper." Guan Yiba gratefully bowed to the shopkeeper and took a small jade box. She put the blood coagulation pill, which was still warm and had a trace of earthy smell, into the jade box. "Miss, what kind of spirit medicine is in this small porcelain bottle? Can this old man take a look?" "Shopkeeper, please." Guan Yiba handed the bottle to the old shopkeeper, who reached out to take it with both hands. The shopkeeper uncorked the bottle, and everyone smelled a refreshing medicinal fragrance in the air. The shopkeeper's expression became serious. He hurriedly and carefully poured out a pill. As he examined it, he nodded and said, "This is a healing medicine that can heal both internal and external injuries. Take one orally and apply it to external injuries. It will form a scab and heal in a day." Although it is only a profound-grade medicinal pill, its effects are hundreds or even thousands of times better than normal profound-grade medicinal pills. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it is a sky-grade medicinal pill. "Miss, quickly put it away and go home to treat your mother's injuries." The shopkeeper hurriedly put the medicine back into the bottle and urged her to leave. Guan Yiba nodded with a slightly excited expression. After thanking the shopkeeper, she hurriedly flew back home. This girl's luck is truly extraordinary. The shopkeeper nodded with a smile. When he turned around, he saw his young master's frosty gaze in the distance. He couldn't help but feel shocked. His young master was fine just now. Why is he like this now? Young Master Ding didn't say anything. He turned around and walked into the medicine shop. His slender figure seemed somewhat lonely and indifferent. The shopkeeper saw that his young master was in a bad mood, so he didn't dare to say anything. He hurriedly followed him in and took care of business. In the distance, the shopkeeper heard a muffled sound from the other side of the corridor. He was inwardly shocked. He could only faintly hear his young master let out a broken murmur. Is he that good? Him? The shopkeeper didn't dare to ask any more questions. He just buried his head and ordered the workers to work. Inside the carriage, Arbor was half leaning against the window, holding his chin as he looked at the falling snow outside. One of his small hands slipped out and caught a sparkling snowflake outside. When she retracted her hand, the snowflake melted into a sparkling and translucent six-chested ice crystal. All right, stop playing. Come and have some hot tea. Mo Lien looked at her helplessly. He pulled her into his arms and gave her a cup of tea with a moderate temperature. Jojo, did you remember your bad nightmare just now? Arbor held the warm teacup and nodded slowly. At that time, I really wanted a benefactor to appear in my life and give me a hand. Unfortunately, until the day he died, he still had nothing. Mo Lien looked at her deeply and smiled. I don't need it now. Our future is in our hands. Isn't it? Yes. Xiao Mu placed her small, warm hand on his face and said with a wink, Mo Lien, when I said that I liked you that day, it was from the bottom of my heart. From the bottom of my heart. I definitely wasn't lying. I know. Mo Lien chuckled. He reached out and gently pulled her little hand away. He pressed it to his lips and kissed it slowly. Jojo, I like you too. Chapter 22-25. Song Prefecture, Phoenix Emperor City. Snowflakes fluttered down like goose feathers. Inside the spacious and deserted Taiji Palace, Duan Yu was dressed plainly as he leaned against the window for a long time. His gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, and no one knew what he was thinking about. The junior eunuch who was accompanying him quickly entered, but he was slightly startled. Your Highness, you've been standing by the window in the wind for nearly 2 hours. The junior eunuch quickly said, How about having Xiao Kezi serve your meal? Duan Yu faintly glanced at him and waved his hand. I'm not hungry. Don't be busy. Withdraw. He only wanted to quietly be alone for a while. The junior eunuch quickly said, Your Highness, you haven't eaten any tea or rice for most of the day. Do you have any requests? Feel free to instruct Xiao Kezi. Duan Yu was fed up with his nagging and turned to retreat from the window to the table. All right, bring some tea over. Your Highness, why are you so long-winded? Duan Yu irritably glared at him. With my cultivation, I won't starve to death even if I don't eat a single grain of rice for half a month, right? What are you worrying about? Xiao Kezi pursed his lips and pitifully retreated. Before he could retreat out of the hall, he saw a dignified and solemn maidservant jogging inside. That maidservant glanced at Xiao Kezi from the corner of her eye, but she didn't ask anything when she saw his listless appearance. She then bowed and saluted. Your Highness, the list for the winter hunt has been announced, and Your Highness also needs to accompany His Highness. There are less than 20 days left before the departure date, so everything needs to be prepared quickly. Xiao Kezi pursed his lips and rolled his eyes. Yuan Zhen, with His Highness cultivation, what doesn't he have in his inner world? What does he need to prepare? The maidservant fiercely glared at Xiao Kezi. Nonsense. How can you speak to His Highness like that? Duan Yu looked up at that junior eunuch who was pursing his lips and couldn't help but chuckle. He threw down the book in his hand and said, all right, go prepare the meal. This punk was quite gutsy to even dare to tease Master. Lil Kuzi giggled and hurriedly responded. He got up and ran out to find someone to serve the meal. Your Highness, it's still quite far away from the winter hunt. Yuanjun bowed his head and said, now that midwinter has arrived, there is a lot of snow and rain, and the road is not easy to travel. There are not many considerate people around His Highness. This servant will draw up a list of names for the trip tomorrow. Your Highness can see who you like to bring, or who you need to add. All right, there's no need to trouble yourself. Duanyu waved his hand disinterestedly and shook his head. Just you and Xiao Kuzi will be fine. That won't do, Yuanjun said with disapproval. Since your Highness doesn't care about this matter, then this servant will make the decision on the manpower. If you're going out, you should at least bring more guards and servants with you. Duanyu couldn't even listen to Yuanjun's rambling. He merely propped up his chin with one hand as he gazed at the balls of snow outside the window, his gaze slightly dazed. How long will it snow in Songzhou? Duanyu raved. Auntie Yuanjun couldn't help but be startled. She turned to look outside the window and said softly, it snows heavily in Songzhou for 7 to 8 days every time. It really is quite long. When I was on Sikong planet, I heard about it before. The Divine Province's Phoenix Wood, Songzhou's Snowfield Flower, and Underworld Province's remote ghost grass grow in the hottest, coldest, and most poisonous places, respectively. Chapter 22-26. According to legend, gathering these 3 divine herbs and adding a sacred rank spirit fruit, the bloodshed vermilion fruit, can create a soul-returning pill that reverses yin and yang. Duanyu propped up his chin with one hand and looked up at Yuanjun. Is that true? Yuanjun was taken aback and pondered for a few seconds before replying. I have indeed heard of these herbs, but it's only been a legend after so many years. This prince heard that the place we're going to hunt this time is an extremely cold place, the heavenly ice and snow region. If we can find that snowfield divine flower while we're at it, then everything will be perfect. Yuanjun couldn't help but sigh when he saw his master's distracted appearance. This servant heard that the snowfield divine flower only grows in extremely cold places. It's fine to touch it once in a while, but after repeated touches, it will open all of its petals and spit out all of the icicles inside. It will envelop a person and devour their bones without leaving a trace. Therefore, it's extremely difficult to pluck the snowfield divine flower. Moreover, this kind of divine herb has always been a fantastic story passed down by word of mouth. In reality, no one has ever obtained it before. Duanyu exhaled softly and muttered with a spurious smile. It's really too similar. A body full of icicles that can take a person's life without warning. As he spoke, Duanyu seemed to have thought of something and chuckled to himself. Yuanjun didn't understand what His Highness was saying, but his gaze lingered on him for a moment. Seeing that Duanyu didn't say anything else, he bowed and slowly retreated. The sky had already completely darkened. Inside Taiji Palace, there were various kinds of candlesticks and palace lanterns that illuminated the entire palace pavilion under the night sky. Green tiles and vermilion buildings. Exquisite jade pavilions, layer upon layer, arranged in picturesque disorder. The lit palace lanterns were set off by the winter lake's setting sun. The curtain of night was reflected on the pavilions, and the dark sky was like a painting to My Chao section break yo, Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's residence. After dismissing the clingy Madame Hua, Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Guan Zhaotang, sat in the main hall with a gloomy expression. He coldly gazed at the middle-aged man kneeling in front of him with his head bowed. Why aren't you speaking? This subordinate has failed in his task. Please punish me, my lord. Guan Zhaotang glanced at him coldly. Forget it. I've underestimated my opponent this time. Get up first. Thank you, Mannerhead. Qi Lianhai lowered his head and stood up. I recently obtained a spirit breakthrough pill that can increase my cultivation. Guan Zhaotang flipped his hand and took out a porcelain bottle from his inner world. With a face full of joy, he said, Let's put the previous matters aside for now. We'll talk about it again when I become a level 14 spirit master. Congratulations, Mannerhead. Qi Lianhai congratulated him expressionlessly. Unfortunately, Guan Zhaotang was so immersed in his own joy that he didn't notice anything wrong with Qi Lianhai's expression. You stand guard outside. Yes. Qi Lianhai walked out and reached out to close the door. He turned his head and looked coldly at Guan Zhaotang through the shadowy door and window. At the same time, in the courtyard of Ani Prefecture, Guan Yibo ran back excitedly and hurriedly helped her dying mother up from the bed. While instructing a servant girl to support her mother, she took out a small dark red fruit from her inner world. Guan Yibo's eyes were filled with excitement. She hurriedly reached out and stuffed the fruit into Aunt Zhang's mouth. "Mother, quickly swallow it, mother," Guan Yibo hurriedly shouted in her heart. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.